VACON 7 will be in Houston, Texas on Saturday, January 31st, 2026, and featuring some of your favorite debaters that you can come out and meet and see debating live, including David Wood, Daniel Hakikachu, Inspiring Philosophy, Mike Jones, and more. Check out the tickets right now in the description box. You don't want to miss it. We're expecting it to sell out. Grab your tickets now. Hey everybody, tonight we're debating evolution on trial, and we are starting right now with Dr. Greg's opening statement. Thanks for being with us, Dr. Greg. The floor is all yours.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate you. Thank you, Jim Bob. So basically, let's say that we are flies right now. We are flies and our friends, and we just left our destiny, our home for some reason, and now we need to go somewhere new. As we come into this vast place, we see that there is a cactus. This cactus looks like a place that we can actually stay, so we start landing on it. As we land on there, unfortunately, some of us as flies are being taken out. Through the wonders of evolution, we can see that there's actually some molecules that are entering into our bodies and interrupting cellular processes like the replication of DNA or some type of fundamental process. And some of us are starting to die because of that. So because of genetic diversity and because some of us have different genomes, the A, C, T's, and G's within our genome are different. Some of us have proteins that change just a little bit, have a little bit different folding, have a little different action for their action sites, and they're actually able to bind and neutralize this new pesticide, which is interacting with our bodies and killing off our population. Now, what's going to happen is there's going to be some of us that live that have that mutations, that have those A, C, T's, and G's in the right spot that actually change that active site to change that protein action. And now they can actually interfere with that pesticide, and some of us live and some of us will die. So basically, this shows, and this, basically the ones that survive are going to have a higher fitness, and therefore those populations are going to change, right? The ones that die, the ones that live are going to have the A, C, T's, and G's in the right spot. So basically this shows in this example that this is why the changes inside of our genomes are very important for evolution, because it creates the dynamism that creates the ability for a population to actually withstand and go forward. And as that new population goes forward to the higher fitness, they're going to be breeding with one another, so therefore they're going to change over time. So yeah, basically this is the definition of evolution, the change of allele frequency over time in a population. And evolution is something that we see and observe in nature, but it's also a tool that we use as a biologist in the lab. So I'm a molecular biologist. I deal with DNA, RNA in the lab, and we can actually use evolution in order to figure out new things. So the field of synthetic biology is the study of how we can basically understand the world around us a little better, removing the biological black box. And one of those ways of doing that is using the vast ability for us to create these millions of different types of mutants inside of a library, and then we can screen this on which is the best mutation through a process called directed evolution. And we see that with Francis Arnold's work, who got the Nobel Prize for creating new types of bonds that have never been seen before in nature. And we also see it in David R. Liu, who is just an absolute one of my favorite scientists in the world. And he's creating new types of CRISPR, which creates new types of medicine that is actually the mutations were actually induced by viruses within the breeding population. And And basically, David R. Liu had used evolution in order to create these new CRISPR tools that were more specific, less off targeted, and actually change the function of CRISPR entirely through directed evolution. So, so that's how we can kind of like we see it and use it in the lab. It's a tool in the lab that we can see, and then we also see it in nature. So evolution is something that we have seen over and over again as we look through nature. So, for example, you can gain a function like the ability to break down nylon, which is something that didn't exist until the 20th century. The evolution of nylonase, which is an enzyme for something that that was just created. And then also like the fitness advantage. It's important to realize that evolution isn't a stairwise process where humans are at the top. It's a branching that happens, and you can actually lose features, and when they're not advantageous anymore. So it actually gives you a fitness advantage. Like, for example, if you're in a cave, you don't need to see anymore. So your your eye genes accrue mutations because metabolically that costs energy. And basically these fish or lizards will actually lose their eyes entirely. Another example is actually within humans. So vitamin C has accrued mutations in our genome, so much so that we don't make our own vitamin C anymore as humans, although it is mandatory for our immune system to function. So like mammals can do this, but we cannot as humans because we evolved while eating citrus. So we had so much external vitamin C internally. We didn't need to anymore. So we stopped that in order because the metabolic money that's being spent in order to make proteins, wasn't needed to be spent anymore. We also see this in like long-term evolution experiments with like the long-term bacterial experiment that's going on for the last like 50 years. Basically, there's been new types of metabolism changes where it's actually been able to like break down citrate for the first time. The cells have gotten larger. And on top of that, it's actually they've had mutations in their DNA repair machinery in order to accrue more mutations in order to evolve faster. So the question then is like, how do we observe this in nature? How do we actually measure evolution? So the real question, I mean, and the point since we've discovered DNA that DNA exists is basically molecular clocks. These are pieces of our DNA that are highly conserved that aren't going to be mutating constantly. So that means that a mutation in this spot is very definitive. So this is in microbes, this is the 16S ribosomal sequencing that we do, and in animals broadly and eukaryotes, it's the cytochrome C, which is in the mitochondria, and we basically like can measure that through sequencing, and we know like how distant things are, and we can start mapping out when these mutations actually happened, because we know that they're not going to have mutations accrued in them until like a DNA polymerase error, and we know the rate of DNA polymerase errors, so therefore we can back calculate. We can also see and construct these phylogenetic trees with endogenous retroviruses, and we also measure evolution kind of like with mating capability. So sometimes, if there is a genome duplication event, other organisms won't be able to mate with one another. So that's another one. And more classically, morphology is kind of like used. But morphology, it can be a tough one because there's actually things called like cryptic species, where cryptic species look exactly identical with one another, but for whatever reason, two distinct populations have actually been created, and they'll actually have two distinct mating populations, and they'll want to look like one another for whatever evolutionary advantage there is. But they'll actually be mating with only within that subgroup. So they'll look like we've had this problem, especially like in dragonflies. This is classically where we've seen it. Is like, well, we thought that there was only one species, and then through morphology, and then there's through sequencing, there's actually multiple. So yeah, that's why I think that evolution has been demonstrated. It's a tool that we use, and it's a thing that absolutely does happen.
Thank you very much for that opening statement. Before I shift us over to Jim Bob's opening statement as well, I want to let you know, folks, if you haven't heard, DebateCon 7 is in Houston, Texas. It's only 9 days away. It's going to have debaters such as David Wood, Jake Brancatella, Daniel Hokigachu, Inspiring Philosophy Mike Jones, Apostate Prophet. It's going to be huge. That is linked in the description box and pinned at the top of the chat and comments. Get your tickets now. In fact, right now, good for only 48 hours, you can use the promo code 20FROMSTREAM. You can see that at the bottom right of the screen for 20% off your tickets. Grab your tickets now, as that code is only good until Saturday at midnight. With that, we're going to kick it over to Jim Bob for his opening. Thanks for being with us as well. Jim Bob, the floor is all yours.
Okay, thank you. What is evolution? The process by which different kinds of living organisms are thought to have developed and diversified from early life forms during the history of the Earth. Evolution is also touted as the single most well-established scientific theories in human history. You would think that the most well-established scientific theory in human history would at minimum be able to make its way through the scientific method, the one we've learned in 7th grade. Evolution doesn't actually make its way through the scientific method. In fact, evolution doesn't even make it beyond the second step of the scientific method. The second contention I have with evolution is that it appeals to things that don't objectively exist in nature. They say evolution includes speciation, the changes of species over time. But when you press them on this, it doesn't actually have an objective standard for what constitutes a species. They expand the category to clades, which they also have no objective standard for discerning. The evolution proponent cannot tell us where or when a clade begins or how they know. They claim that humans are in a clade, but if you ask them how they determine this, they don't know. They literally appeal to just definitions. They say we defined it that way. When you ask them whether or not the human category itself could be its own clade, they say, I guess, there's no pushback on the taxonomy of these things. It seems completely arbitrary. The methodology further for evolution uses arbitrary systems that are inconsistent. For example, a lot of times they appeal to fossils. They look at a fossil a fossil is found to have similar anatomical characteristics as something older than it, and it also shares characteristics to something similar that is younger than it, and they claim to observe transition between the two. Now, my opponent didn't mention fossils or transitions. He's more myopic, he's more granular with his view of evolution, but to defend evolution is to defend these things as well. So the problem with the whole idea of picking up a fossil, seeing similarities, anatomical, phenotypical similarities, and drawing out this conclusion that you're witnessing a demonstration of transition, the problem is transition is an actual event that happens. That's an activity. Fossils are static objects. Another problem with this, evolution inserts a story about the objects and declares that transition happens just because they could imagine it happening. On what basis could I not say that finding a fossil with any shared characteristics would be something demonstrable of transition? To a sloped nose, to a fingernail, to an elbow bone. It shares something, so how could you say in the grand scheme of things it's not also evidential to transitions? Well, like I said, transition is the thing in question. Do things transition at all? Now, everything my opponent listed, I appreciate. He's looking at the granular level of organisms, singular, populations of flies, populations of bacteria, and he's looking at changes or adaptations that they're capable of. But the thing is, capability is the thing in question. Whether or not organisms at the population level or the individual level already have it embedded in them to react a certain way to stimuli is a question, or whether or not you could actually trace through and say, this was a random mutation that produced this. Perhaps my opponent is on the cutting edge of evolution, and soon they'll be saying that there's actually nothing random about mutations at all, that they have function altogether universally, every one of them. That could be the case. We just don't know. Not only does similarity in anatomy not confirm relatedness or common ancestry, but if evolution was true, it would need to be the case that entirely dissimilar animals would be related the further back you go. Determining common ancestry by similarity loses its power because dissimilarity is required the further back you go. So saying, look at this ape-like thing. That's our uncle. Back in the day, we come from this because look how similar. So they use similarity in that sense. Oh, they are similar. I could imagine, I could interpolate the animation in my head of one becoming the other. I could imagine it. The problem is the further you go back, the more dissimilar things are, but you still have to hold that it is in fact an ancestor, regardless of it being dissimilar. So evolution is always claimed to occur also at the through random mutation at the population level, right? That's how it's talked about. Notice how my opponent granted himself populations. The only way my opponent can study what he studies is if he already has populations in front of him. But there's a problem with that. First of all, the fossil problem is when you find a fossil, you're not actually finding a population level of a fossil. So you could never tell if the said characteristic, whether it was similar or not, was present at the population level. It's just begging the question there. Speaking of populations, evolution looks at and tries to make sense of diversity of life as we see it today. It claims that random mutation and natural selection is responsible for diversity we see today. The problem is populations themselves are a featured example of diversity. Therefore, evolution is responsible for producing populations. Now, my opponent is not studying at that grand level. He's studying at the microscopic level. He's really in it, high level magnification. But he still has to defend this if he's going to defend evolution. If populations are a product of evolution, he can't talk about evolution granting himself populations. He has to tell me how evolution, random mutation, and these mechanisms produced the diverse populations that he's actually studying. He can't just say, give me some populations and I'll tell you how evolution works. I don't grant populations, and I don't need to. Why? Populations are a featured example of diversity in nature. My opponent can't argue for evolution without first giving himself populations, but they need to be produced. This is a common ad hoc position the evolution proponent takes. They grant themselves these things: fully functional, baby-making organism packed to the skin with hyper-specialized organs that work in unity with purpose and function, all of which we are also told are the product of random mutations. In other words, the liver, product of random mutation. The heart, product of random mutation. Your mind, your brain, same thing. Your elbows, everything about your body. If you go back in time, there was a time it didn't look like that. Maybe it didn't even exist. And the random mutation process actually somehow produced a cascade of engineering, actual engineering toward hyperspecific functions. So this is something that has to be explained under the evolutionary view. You can't just study it after you have all of that stuff. You have to tell us how exactly evolution produced these things. So how does an accidental process like random mutation produce a liver from a position of not having a liver? My opponent will probably say, well, grant me a proto-liver and I'll tell you a story. Is there any reason to believe that a series of mutations would result in a mechanism just coincidentally being awesome at filtering toxins among other tasks, then by chance maintaining the structure of that organ in conjunction with other hyper-specialized organs that it works together with? It doesn't work in a vacuum. It works together with the other body parts, the other mechanisms in the body. Now, if something as specialized as a liver is a product of many generations of mutations within a population, this means that considerably more previous generations survived and reproduced just fine without a fully functioning liver. This brings up another issue. If it takes thousands or even millions of years to develop not just a metabolic system, but a defensive and offensive system with proper functions, then the organism must be capable of surviving and reproducing without those functions for many generations. So why would a population of organisms keep a non-functioning tool that's in the process of becoming an amazing tool, an amazing piece of engineering for millions of years down the line when it doesn't actually provide them anything? This throws a bit of a wrench into the story of evolution, because if you say position A in time, this thing doesn't have these features, and in a million years after random mutation, it accidentally develops a really hyper specialized features, you have to argue that every step of the way, there was a justification for keeping the almost cooked, almost done oven, right? Pie in the oven. It's almost done. We're getting there. The heart's almost done. The liver's almost done. We're getting there. Just wait another couple of weeks, right? Well, in this case, it's millions of years. Now, to put it this way, there must be a beginning of a penis under the evolutionary view. Why would an entire population of organisms keep 1/8 of a penis? For some of you, 1/3 for millions of years if it provides nothing. And in parallel, a vagina, which develops independently of the penis, and yet its final form is entirely compatible and functional with this other thing. What is the function of a penis or a vagina before it's fully realized in its form and function? From the evolutionary view, you really have to hold in your head that these undeveloped things that don't actually work together yet are developing independent of each other, and then they reach a final crescendo where they finally work together. But it's accidental. It's totally accidental from their view because it's produced by something called random mutation. Random mutation sets off some cascade of a line of informed code. The informed code says, hey, build this, do that. But there's no intentionality. It doesn't say, let's build a penis, let's build a vagina. It just does it. And then natural selection goes, I don't know what's this. Are you guys good at this or not? I'm going to kill you if you're not good at this. And it's accidentally good at this, right? The problem is to even develop a penis and a vagina over time through the evolutionary view, you have to have something that provides you sexual reproduction to begin with. So if you started a penis at one level of the population and you were capable of reproducing without the penis, you're saying the evolution proponent is saying that actually happens at the population level and everybody gets a nub. For no reason, though. There's no reason for the nub, but everyone gets one, right? That's what you have to view. That's what you have to say under this evolutionary view. Evolution is conveyed to people at a very low resolution storyline. Now, I'll give my opponent credit. He did not give us this story at such a vague level. He's more like in it. He's more in the biology of it. But when you tell the story at a grand scale, imagine it's like a circle, right? I draw a circle with chalk on the chalkboard. When you stand 30 feet away from the circle, it looks like it's a complete circle, right? But as I get closer and I want to press evolution with some questions at the granular level, I walk closer to the chalkboard, and lo and behold, the circle is actually made of dashes and dots, and it's not actually connected the way I thought it was from far away. Now I examine it, I start asking some hard questions about this, and the only thing the evolution proponent usually says is, well, listen, can you guys move back 30 feet and then it'll make more sense? Can you just move back 30 feet and look at it from a broader lens? And then I don't have to talk about these granular explanations of how you get populations, how you get eyeballs, how you get livers, how you get hearts, how you get all these working parts from a process that you're claiming is random mutations. And out of, you'll probably know more than me on this for sure, but out of the types of mutations, the ones that you're relying on to be beneficial are the least consistent in their occurrence. And the more consistent are ones that are deleterious and they don't do anything. And so it actually increases a problem mathematically for you. Now, based on his opener, I don't think Greg is used to daily defense of the grand scale narrative of evolution. He's used to defending, well, let me look at this biology. Let me look at this organism. Let's look at the fly and what it does. Let's see if something changes with the fly and it's able to like respond to things. I grant all of that. That's the thing. But the thing is, things happening at a part in the body at the population level, within a population, within a species, within a clade, it doesn't justify the notion that if that happens, it follows that a fly eventually will break off and not be a fly anymore. Like that's the part that is not sold to me, and that's the part I'm really interested in dissecting tonight.
You got it. With that, we're going to jump into the open dialogue. I had not mentioned, folks, if it's your first time here at Modern Day Debate, I'm your host, Dr. James Coons. We are a fully neutral platform hosting debates on science, religion, and politics. And as I mentioned, DebateCon 7, Modern Day Debate's official conference is happening in Houston, Texas, Saturday, January 31st. You don't want to miss it. Grab your tickets. If you are like, James, I'm in Australia, I can't make it, it's just too far. If you see the card at the bottom right of your screen right now, you can watch all of it live. It's a perk for our Final Word channel members here at Modern Day Debate. Check out those channel memberships right now so you can watch the entire conference live. With that, we're going to kick it over to open dialogue. Thank you very much, gentlemen. The floor is yours.
Yeah, I was taking notes, but I would rather go like point by point if you wouldn't,
Sure.
if you wouldn't mind. So I guess my question kind of with what you were just talking about, I mean, when do you know a transition has happened?
Well, that's what I'm questioning. If you say
Mhm.
like, I take it you hold that there was a time when what we call humans today as a species, as a class, actually didn't exist, and there was a moment where it did exist.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
But like let's think about how would you measure that transition that's happening over time?
I
Well, how
wouldn't
would you
because
do?
I wouldn't assume that it does. That's for you to defend. That's why I'm asking, like, if you hold that there's such a thing as a clade, and that under the clade there's all these subsets of categories, including human, let's say, it's on the person making the affirmative that clades exist that to tell me when does a clade exist and from what base does a clade exist. The same for a human. So if you believe that a human arose, they use all these like sort of poetic words that I don't believe are strict biological terms. If you hold that a human being, the class of human beings, arose from something that wasn't a human being, then there has to be a defining standard for that. And actually, in my opening, I'm actually asking you the same question. How would you determine when and how, by what methodology would you say, here it is, this was the moment humans came on the scene? Like, what's the criterion? I've looked everywhere for the criterion. You know what I get, Greg? I get that it's just or arbitrarily defined. They actually don't have a biological standard. They don't have a categorical standard. They don't have a set of attributes, and they don't have a way of knowing at what point that happened. And yet they say, how many thousands of years ago, this is when humans, quote, came on the scene. Well, if I'm interested in evolution, I want to know if it's true. When someone says that, the first thing I'm going to ask is very simple, like my own kid would ask. How do you know that?
Mm.
Like, what's the standard? Is that a fair question? What's the standard? What's the criteria for determining and the methodology for determining humans came on the scene?
Yeah, that's I mean that's taxonomy and phylogenetics, and that's like a whole field of science that people debate constantly, right? That is what the debate. They have entire conferences on like if something's a lizard mammal or a mammal lizard, and they'll talk about this stuff, and that's kind of like the debate. But like let's just say that we went back in time to when like dinosaurs were extinct, went extinct 100 million years ago,
I wouldn't
and
I wouldn't grant that either. I would ask the same question. How would you determine that there was a class, a universal class called dinosaurs that you're granting yourself? Obviously, when you say the term dinosaurs went extinct, even if I granted you the timeline, when you say that, aren't you saying there's an objective thing categorically called dinosaurs?
yeah. Hmm.
Well, under the evolutionary view, isn't it true that there's no such thing actually as an objective species thing called a dinosaur? That's arbitrary.
I mean, it is arbitrary in the fact that it's like dozens of, a dozen and a mile are kind of like an arbitrary distinction. But walking a dozen feet and walking a mile is kind of the same mechanism, and that's what it is. So we kind of like post hoc go back and say, oh, there's
Post
actually like
hoc.
a species here. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. I would say post hoc isn't really science. First of all, that's another one problem I have with evolution. Post hoc rationalization is actually fallacious thinking, and so that's why I ask. Well, if you say a story about the past and you use categories for the sake of workability to tell the story, that doesn't tell me that the categories have any realness to them. And so that's why I argue evolution ultimately reduces to, in philosophy, what's called nominalism, which is like all you really have are independent units called creatures. And your taxonomy is actually not grounded in anything objective. And yet I'm supposed to believe in this ever changing flux, fluid gradient of all animals, where it's one thing, a nature, oh, the nature of humanity, the nature of a cow. This is a classification, but also it changes. Okay, when does the nature of something change into something else entirely? At what
Hmm.
point? And that's a fair question, because if the biological claim is this is an animal, this is a group of animals. Be more specific, maybe, than dinosaurs, like something very specific. Let's say a Pakicetus. I'm sure you're aware of that Pakicetus,
Sure.
wolf-like. It's a wolf-like creature, right?
Okay.
The whale, in 15 million years, we're told that random mutation that's happening in the Pakicetus land wolf-like animal. The succession of random mutation and generational succession eventually produces in 15 million years the whale. And I asked someone I previously debated, Greg, I said, is the whale a Pakicetus? Is the whale the category of the Pakicetus, the wolf?
No, it's not.
Well, but the thing is, where do you draw the line and say, no, it actually comes, the ancestor of the whale is the wolf, this wolf-like thing, not the wolf, I'm saying, but they say it's a wolf-like creature. But it's in the same category as that wolf-like creature. And so this is the problem. You start with a universal thing called a wolf-like creature on land. You end in 15 million years with a whale. And in between, you try to find confirming fossils that sort of interpolate the animation between this thing and this thing. Now, I don't even grant you that the fossils actually demonstrate change, because change is an event and fossils are static. But the question is, how many different species, and how do you determine this change from the Pakicetus to the whale? How many different species are you talking about if you admit that the whale is not the Pakicetus?
I mean, 99.9% of all species that have ever existed have gone extinct. So, I mean, would you that's kind of like the problem, is that all of those branches of, and we could theoretically line up all of those species, one after another, and it would be a smooth transition, and you'd see that, but all of those have gone extinct, and that's why we say everything that's alive today is as evolved as everything else. So, I mean, would you agree that like the majority of organisms that have ever existed are extinct?
I wouldn't know if that's the case. How would you know that's the case?
Well, we can tell. We can tell because
How can you know that the majority of things that have ever existed went extinct, as opposed to, from your evolutionary view, changed form?
Because we can look through fossil evidence that they exist, and we can see that like they're not here anymore.
Wait a second. Fossils, by the way, fossils are very rare as they are, right?
Like North American lions, the giant ground sloth, all that kind of stuff. I mean,
you're pointing to certain things, fossils, but fossils themselves are snapshots of animals, and the assumption is that there's a huge population of those animals, right? Okay. First of all, that alone hasn't been established. But second of all, even if I granted there's a population of the animal you found that you're declaring it is extinct, I'm not sure how you come to the knowledge that every animal that ever existed, most of them are extinct. How did you come to, like, I'm asking for the methodology specifically, how you know that?
Yeah, I mean, we know through like different types of the DNA evidence. I would say we'd have like the phylogenetic trees that are like that aren't like lining up, and we know that like through, again, fossils and that kind of thing, that it's just, we don't have all the species that have ever existed aren't here to make that case.
I know, but they're not here. You're inventing that they did exist. You have to basically invent a bunch of species that you actually have no evidence ever existed, and say that they went extinct. How would you know if you're inventing a new species that went extinct or not?
I mean, we can tell lots of different ways. Like, so fossil evidence would be one, but then also genetics as well. I mean, you could tell and put those pieces together.
Well, I mean, what I'm saying, I want you to get the question here is like, if you found some things and you were like, this is probably a population and we don't see it today, so it's probably extinct, right? I grant that. Like, you find something, it looks like some other thing, and you don't see it around today. There are some things that we even have footage of from maybe within this century that no longer exist, and we say that once existed, it doesn't exist. That's not what I'm asking. I'm not asking about the fossils you have access to. I'm saying that you're making an assumption that there's a bunch of animals that you don't even know their names or what they look like, and you're just creating it in a narrative that they did exist and then they died. But I'm not sure, you're not pointing to them. You only have access to what you've uncovered in the ground, right?
I would say DNA is probably a stronger evidence than just what we found in the ground. I would argue that. I mean, because there's lots of we share 50% of our DNA with a banana, for example. Like there's lots of different molecular processes that had to evolve, and there's lots of steps along there. I mean, the DNA like that we see changes over time. Like, would you agree with that? If we took like a population of bacteria or something, and we started doing our own evolution experiment to see if these things change, to see if we can create a new kind, like you were talking about. I mean, how would we monitor the bacteria to see if it's transitioning to a new kind, like you were saying?
Well, the thing is, I grant that something today, like dogs or bacteria, flies, mosquitoes, I'm granting you that it's an experiment to introduce something to an individual or a population and see how it responds. And if it responds in a way where it no longer can reproduce with its previous kind, and you guys say, voila, we have a new species, like colloquially, I could even grant that, but that's actually not what's in question, Greg. It's what's in question is the assumption of evolution isn't whether or not there are variations of a type of animal that you have a universal category. For instance, you agree a mosquito is not a cow, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So there are a bunch of things that you would say those aren't mosquitoes. If a mosquito is introduced to DDT or something else, and it produces some sort of mutation that's disadvantage or advantageous, it's not a mosquito anymore. You understand? So I grant that if that happens, you still call it a mosquito. What I'm pointing to is a much bigger thing that needs to be defended under evolution is that the assumption that you have to make is there was a time where an entire category of things no longer what was that category anymore. Like it just branched off and it's no longer that thing. But every example that you're pointing to for an experiment is an example of a bacteria being altered in such a way, and it's still a bacteria. A mosquito is altered in a certain way. It's still a mosquito.
How is it altered? How is it altered though? Like how are we altering it?
Well, if you introduce something genetically and it creates some sort of a mutation, a lot of times in the experiments are causing some sort of harm to the animal, the population, or the individual, and you're testing to see whether or not it reacts to it and maybe builds a defense in reaction to the thing that you're introducing. So that's like adaptation. The question there is whether or not the animals, the organisms had the information built into their system to respond that way or not.
Yeah.
That's fascinating to me. However, that's not the question. The question is the long view of evolution is that the thing itself, the category itself, produces an entirely new thing that's not that thing.
Exactly. That's my question though. So if we're monitoring this bacteria, so it seems like we're in agreement that DNA exists. We agree that DNA can like accrue mutations over time, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Inside a population, you're already given though, but
not necessarily. I mean, you could have a genetic bottleneck event that is just like one organism. Like
let me ask it this way. Let me ask it this way.
Like with the endosymbiotic event that created the mitochondria organelle, like we don't know any other time that's ever happened in nature. Not to say that it isn't, because 99.9% of microbiology hasn't been cultured or sequenced, and so we don't actually know that it could be out there. But from our understanding, that's what it is. But so you're having an extreme bottleneck event, and you have to basically overcome that. But my point is like if we are monitoring this bacteria, we're doing an experiment right now, and we are monitoring this bacteria, and we are trying to find what you're talking about. We're trying to find when bacteria goes into this second transition.
Oh, wait, hold on. Transition to some other form of a bacteria, right?
It's whatever you think bacteria could transition to.
Well, no, because evolution says you actually have to claim this is a category difference. Like there's a category of kinds, like species, like dogs, right? You say, look, do you deny that like all of these dogs are derivative of this wolf-like thing? Look at all the different kinds of dogs we have. And I go, yeah, there's different kinds of dogs. And the only reason we can say there's different kinds of dogs is because we have a larger category called the canine category. The question I'm not asking you, Greg, I actually already concede and agree with you that once you have a category of things, you can have variation of that category of things. We call those species. I'm not talking about whether or not there's different species of animals inside a category. What's in question is the category. So let me ask it this way. when you do your microbiology work, right, and you see that there's these this phenomenon of change within a bacteria, is that what you mostly study, like bacteria?
Yeah,
Or
yeah.
okay,
But
so
yeast, algae, yeah.
yeast, okay. When you look at yeast, would you agree that yeast and bacteria is a part of the whole of biology, a part of the whole of biology? Okay. And when you look at bacteria and study it and see its change, to you, it's reasonable to look at the part of the whole of biology, look at that part and say, these changes happen at this part level. It's reasonable to say that it happens at the whole level, right?
If you think that it happens at the part level, it's reasonable to happen at the whole level.
Yeah. Like for instance,
Not
if you see changes in humans at the individual level, right? In an individual, for instance, let me be more clear. Like when a child is conceived and the form of the fetus begins, you look at that, right? Let's imagine it's on the screen, and you see change in form from conception to birth, right? Almost
yeah.
micro shot of what you imagine evolution is, almost like
Sure, yeah.
this change.
Embryology, yeah.
Is it reasonable from your perspective to look at that process from conception to birth with a child, the morphology that happens in the 9 months? From your position, is it reasonable to look at that and say, well, that must happen to the universal category of the human?
Except for if there was like some type of mutation or something that would stop that process or something like that, you know, and then those humans would be more fit for whatever reason or something like that. But I mean, again, those things can be selected for. So like the events in like adaptability, just the ability to adapt and do adaptations can be selected for. So we see this a lot in insects, where we'll have like brother and sister flies or whatever, and one fly will have like 2 or 3 times the size of the genome than the other, and it's like, well, why is that happening? It's like,
I understand.
well, it's because the environment changes so much that they need, it's called phenotypic elasticity. They need some way of like, you know, creating some change
I understand.
in order to deal with that.
I understand. That question is a matter of whether or not animals, organisms at that level have it built into them to be reactive to the external world. That's interesting, but my question was more specific to when you look at the changes that you call evolution at the micro level. When you look at the changes, you call it evolution at the micro level in bacteria. Are you saying that it's reasonable to say what's true of the changes of the part called bacteria that I see? It's reasonable to say it's true of the wholeness of all biology. Is that what you're saying?
Maybe that it's possible, but not that change wouldn't be true for all of them, right? It would be like
not the same change. Sorry. I want to be clearer here. I want you to be able to answer questions. I'm not being as clear as I can be. You see any change inside the bacteria at the part level, right? Because you agreed bacteria, when you look at bacteria, you're looking at a part of the wholeness of biological world. The
Sure.
animal
You're looking
world.
at a strain. Yeah, you're
That's
looking
right.
at a strain of a.
Is it reasonable to say, because I see changes, these type of changes at the bacterial level, the part level, is it reasonable for you to assume this must necessarily changes, not this type of change, any changes must exist at the whole level?
I mean, bacteria is very hard because they can literally like take up environmental DNA and they can just like kind of be like what it is. So this is why we use molecular clocks in order to kind of like understand that these things happen. This is why we use 16S ribosomal sequencing to understand like this is like a big step and not just, you know, does that make sense?
Yeah, I understand. I'm just trying to get the reasoning. If you agree with the statement, what's true of the part is likely to be true of the whole. So what's true about
Not
changes about the part of the small molecular level, because I don't know if you make this argument, but people I debate with, they often say, look, Jim Bob, do you agree microbiology or microevolution happens? I get really rigorous. What do you mean by that? Tell me what's happening. Someone like you, Dr. Greg, could actually tell me what you mean by microevolution. It sounds like by your opener, what you mean by microevolution is you introduce things, you manipulate bacteria, yeast, and these things, and you watch to see how they adapt to certain situations, right? And they change in a sense that they're adaptable, but they don't change and become not bacteria, right? They just remain bacteria, but they get awesome at something, or they don't get awesome. A lot of times they die, right? A lot of these changes that they call evolutionary changes are actually kind of kill off the thing. But either way, in either direction, isn't that what you're calling microevolution?
Yeah, I mean, there's just evolution. I don't agree with like micro and macro evolution. Like, I don't think that exists. But but I mean, let's say that there was a change. Like, we were actually observing in that bacterial population, we're seeing that transition into not bacteria. I mean, your expected results.
Hold on.
Let's say that we were seeing it.
What
would you expect to see be the case?
This is good, because this is a part of the problem with nominalism in evolution, which is this. You just said, if there was a bacteria and we started manipulating it, and then we saw that it was becoming not bacteria, that's what's in question. How would you know that the manipulation of current bacteria was becoming not bacteria? How would you know that was the case?
DNA evidence.
What do you mean? How would you know from DNA that the generality, the universal called bacteria, that's a universal category, right? Bacteria is not anything that's not, right? There's a bunch of things you accept aren't bacteria, right?
Yeah, I mean, we see this, like, we see genetic evidence. So like the mitochondrial genome is completely different than the nuclear genome of a yeast, for example. And even in a plant, you actually have 3 different types of genomes. You have the chloroplast, you have the mitochondria, and the nuclear genome. And then we actually see, it's really interesting. Some plants actually don't have a endosymbiotic event with the cyanobacteria. They actually have an endosymbiotic event with another red algae. So it's completely different. It's not like a stepwise, like, in order to get to a plant, you need to have these steps. It's just, it can be a lot of different ways.
Okay, I understand. So, so you're saying that if you did stuff to bacteria in the lab, introduce something to bacteria, and you watched it change, and you were like, is this even still bacteria? You're saying you would study the DNA before, as it was, and you would study the DNA after, and you're going to determine whether or not it's a new thing altogether.
Exactly. Yeah. So like you would see the ability for the separate 2 different genomes, and then you would see it come together. Like, for example, the chloroplast, because of the endosymbiotic event that's actually happened, there's actually been a massive genome minimizing event where you can actually trace the old cyanobacteria, like free living, the cyanobacteria genes actually got shuttled from the chloroplast genome to the nuclear genome. So there's a huge minimizing event, and we can trace back through genetics and look at it.
Here's the problem, though. I'll give you probably know of this. Okay, are you aware of CTVT?
No, I don't know what you mean.
Okay. So there's a cancer in a dog, and it grows. And you said, well, we'll look at the bacteria and see if the DNA changes. The problem with this is that if we swap the bacteria with cancer in this case, when they remove the cancer from the dog and they test it, the full DNA of the cancer is dog. Now, I want to ask you a question. Is that, from your view, an example of a dog evolving into another dog, but it's actually just a clump of cancer? Because
I'm gonna have to look at that and see. I mean, the fact that it's creating like a genome shuffling event, and it's creating like some. I mean, that does happen with viruses. They do.
So it's
have lateral gene transfer. Horizontal.
Yeah, but based on your standard, if you say, well, if I look at bacteria and introduce something and manipulate it, and I go, well, how would you know? Because what I'm interested in is in whether or not universal categories of organisms can adapt and react to external stimuli. I agree that happens. I'm asking a long, deep time question about the changes of the categories themselves, not the things in the category, right? So in this example of bacteria, a category itself, when I ask you, well, how would you, if you're going to try to prove that the bacteria itself evolves and becomes not a bacteria, and you say, well, we would look at the DNA. The reason I brought up the dog cancer is, if I grab that clump of cancer that was identical to dog DNA and I brought it to the vet, would it make sense to ask my vet to help look at my dog? Like, would it make sense to say, hey, can you check out my dog?
I mean, a DNA, like pieces of DNA is not an organism.
I understand, but you said you would check the DNA
Mhm.
to determine whether it became a new category of an organism. But
Yeah.
I'm giving a counterexample of how if cancer can adopt laterally the DNA, and the DNA, its DNA is literally dog DNA. Like that's the DNA that's
Yeah.
there. We wouldn't say that's a dog, right?
I mean, I guess I would have looking more into this example, but cancers
Okay.
are like 20% of them are heritable, like they're from genetics, and then 80% of them are from some type of like external source, or that's
I
something
got
like
it.
that. So it's not necessarily like it can be your DNA that creates that cancer.
I understand, but that's not what's in question. The question is, because I look at that, I don't actually come to the conclusion. I had someone argue with me that that is a dog. They were literally
Okay.
telling me the clump of cancer is a dog, actually. Like, and so I'm saying, well, no, that's cancer growing on cells, and the cells are the dog. And the
Yeah.
cancer takes on the cells of the dog. But that's, I'm just, the reason I bring that up is I'm giving a counterexample of why DNA, when I asked you, how would you know bacteria changes from bacteria class of animal or of organism to not that, you said, look at DNA. But I said, well, no, if it's true that there's a DNA lateral jump that happens, you might not come to the conclusion that you're going to use DNA to determine what the new category of animal is. What would you look at? Like, well, like for instance, let's play this out. You start messing with bacteria. You agree bacteria is its own specific class of organism. It's not a tree. It's not this. It's not that. It's bacteria. You
Agreed.
manipulate it, and you're trying to get it to become something that it's not. You're trying to get it to jump from bacteria class to something totally different.
Yeah.
Altogether, right? How when you say, well, I asked how would you know that happened? You said look at the DNA, but how would you know the owner, the categorical owner, let's say, of that DNA? How would you know what to assign that DNA to? You know what I mean? Like the DNA of what? What is it the DNA of?
I mean, we could sequence the DNA of what it is, and then we could align it with other organisms that exist in the world, and then see where it is. So you could see like some type of, some type of megalovirus endosymbiotic event which created the nucleus. For example, you would sequence the megalovirus, you'd sequence the bacteria separately, and then you would sequence them both together, and then you would see them in a new culture. This is like what Koch's postulates would be. So you would have to establish Koch's postulates and another, like, bacteria, grow them separately, and then now they are like different. You would be able to check like the 16S ribosomal sequencing. They would likely be different. And that's how you could tell. And you could, through, like, usually in biology you have to have like multiple lines of evidence. So DNA would be one, microscopy would be another one that you'd have to show, maybe probably some X-ray crystallography to show that this thing actually does exist. So
but doesn't a virus need an existing organism as a host?
Yes.
Okay, so a virus is that, do you take the position the virus is alive or not alive?
They're not considered living. No, I mean,
Okay.
I was talking about megaloviruses because that's our hypothesis for where the nucleus came from.
Okay, actually, let's talk about where things come from. Do you hold that a process called random mutation produced hyper specialized things like eyeballs, livers, hearts, brains?
And random mutations, but then natural selection, like that's the how they actually like got chosen.
Selected. I get it.
So in the same thing where we can talk about like where the virus going in, the megalovirus going in, like we can, there would be some that took up two of the nuclei, probably, maybe there'd be some that didn't take it at all. Maybe there would be some that took some of the megalovirus's genome through like little pieces and tried to incorporate it if it was a naturally competent, strain of bacteria. So we would be able to see if that actually worked, and then we could see through sequencing like what actually works.
Okay. The question was, do you just, yes or no, do you believe that random mutation, I understand you think random mutation produces a sort of pathway to produce appendages and mechanisms over time, and then ultimately what's deciding is the environment, natural selection. Is that
Sure.
is it suitable or not? What I'm asking is the first stage. I'm not asking about how it's selected for. I'm asking, do you believe that the random mutation is the mechanism inside an organism that already exists, has some type of body, that the random mutation process actually starts off the pathway from A, not having a liver, to B, fully functioning toxic filter? Do you believe random mutation produces the liver?
Yeah.
Okay, so from your perspective, given that you study it at the granular level, could you explain to me how an organism or a population of organisms that doesn't have a liver, how random mutation happening inside of these organisms at the population level or individual level produces a hyper specialized functioning thing that has a task to it, like the liver? How does it produce the liver?
Do you know what like the function of the liver is?
I know the basic function. I know it does a lot of things, but the main function would be processing toxins and facilitating the removal of those toxins from the body.
Exactly. Yeah. So basically, it would be similar to the example that I brought up with the flies. So basically, you'd start off with some population that actually was able to have maybe like a heat shock protein or some other protein that was used and had some mutations in it and was actually able to bind to a toxin that they were exposed to in the circulating bloodstream or whatever it is. And then basically those that protein would be created inside of some type of specialized cell. And then those specialized cells, then if they were exposed to more of the toxin, you would have, the evolution of, does creating more of these different types of specialized cells increase the fitness of that organism? And if it did, then you'd increase the amount of, production of that protein or making more specialized cells. And that would be kind of like the pathway that is being tested. And then eventually, then you'd have some type of like specialization of the cells being encompassed in some type of organ or something like that, where now they're clumping together and now they're being used, and you're seeing more of a fitness advantage as you create more and more of these cells. And I mean, you see this a lot. So chordata is what, created the liver. And we've actually seen this in like some proto livers in fish, for example. So like some of these are actually still living.
Okay, but the thing is, when I asked you, how do you go from not liver to liver, it sounded like you granted yourself a rudimentary proto-liver, because what we're talking about is the function of any type of cellular structure that can identify something called a toxin, as it's informed somehow to identify a toxin to begin with, right?
It's the ability to bind to that toxin. That would be the ability. It wouldn't be a protoliver at all. It would be the ability to create and make a specific enzyme that was able to degrade the toxin.
Okay,
that would be the thing.
Let's pretend, for the sake of analogies, to make it simpler, that we're talking about Ford, their manufacturing company, and there is a conveyor, like a assembly line.
Okay.
Could you tell us how you actually what's happening, right? Because you're saying, it sounded like you said, well, there's a cell and there's some biology there already that attaches itself to the toxin, what you call a toxin, some foreign thing in the body, right? Essentially, any foreign thing
that needs to be filtered out. Yeah, the function that you agreed to.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, but the function, would you agree, before you even get the liver, you have metabolism, catabolic and anabolic?
Yeah, I would say that there would have to be some type of living organism. Yeah.
Okay, so would you agree that under the evolutionary view, that random mutation would also have to produce what you call metabolism, catabolic and anabolic?
Sure.
Okay, so anabolic, correct me if I'm wrong, is more of building, catabolic is breaking down?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so that's a task, right?
That's evolved for, yeah.
Okay. There was a time, just like the question about the liver, there was a time where the organism didn't have the task of doing that. and it needed to evolve that task the way you think we evolved the liver or the eyes or anything else that has a task for the body. So how does random mutation, from your view, produce metabolic tasks? How does the random mutation process produce that?
Because, well, you basically have the production of those proteins costs money metabolically. Like, right, in the Ford example, you would have to dedicate some type of workers on that conveyor line actually searching and trying their flathead screwdrivers in order to deal with this new screw that we've never encountered. Let's say it's a Torx wrench or something, and you're like, this Torx screw, like, we don't have a Torx wrench, but maybe some of us have different types of flatheads that could actually go in there and actually, like, do some work on that Torx screw. So
Okay.
that would be the thing that would evolve. But
Okay,
it is
but
taxing. It is like, metabolically, it does cost money, in order to make a protein. So it's actually like, it's
it's
not advantageous in order to just have like tons of different flathead screwdrivers, for
I
example.
understand, but it sounds like you're saying in order for an organism to produce the worker scenario, the factory scenario where you're breaking things down, catabolic, and also building things up, anabolic, that you need a proto metabolic system to even do that part. Because wouldn't it take calories? I use the word calories, you use the word money. I kind of like that one better. It uses money, it's taxing
Mm.
to build a metabolic system, right?
Yeah.
So then now you have a necessary proto metabolic system. Now let's get out of the micro for a second,
But you're
because
right. You're right. If this, in the early stages of the liver evolution, if you have this organism that would go into a new environment that doesn't have that toxin, there's nothing to say that this proto liver would somehow, or the toxin that takes out the other toxin, the antitoxin. There's no reason for that toxin to be made. So then, therefore, it basically accrues mutations and then it turns off, just like our vitamin C and and a human.
okay, yeah. So it sounds like there's always, when I ask these questions, it sounds like there's always a necessary ad hoc pre-assembly line, pre-engineering system that accounts for the thing before the thing. It always keeps going back in time. And a lot of people who I debate about evolution, they're like, I'm not debating you on abiogenesis. I'm not actually interested. I think it's related, but even granting you just basic things like basic essential parts of life, I still don't really get a clear answer on, okay, well, if random mutation must necessarily be the thing that produces hyper specialized function, then it sounds like you're saying it actually might not be random mutation producing hyper specialized function.
It's random mutation, but then you're missing, like, through natural selection, and
Okay.
that's how it is, because it's microbes are even crazier. Like, as humans, it's hard to grasp what is actually happening, because it's not just, we think so singularity, like, as a singular organism ourselves. Like, as a community of microorganisms, you have millions of different types of, in this example, factories that are creating this thing. So
Okay.
you would have tons of different, literally millions of different factories trying to try out different Torx wrenches and stuff like that.
Right.
And the ones that had the right screwdriver, or had the right flathead screwdriver in order to deal with this Torx screw, that would be the one that would just create more of one another.
Okay,
and then on
but
top of that, you even have horizontal gene transfer. So you basically have new guys coming into the factory saying, hey, I got a new type of screwdriver here. We can try this one. And we have millions of different factories that are all trying new stuff. So we don't, it's hard for us to imagine, but like, evolution doesn't necessarily mean heredity with microbes. It can be horizontally done as well.
okay, I understand, but it sounds like the way in which you talk about it and is like there's some sort of functional purpose to all of it toward something. It has, like, I use the word towardness. Do you believe that it actually does have functional towardness, that it's building? Because when you use the assembly line, it's using tools. Tools have function. There's a reason there's a tool. There's a reason and purpose for it. From my perspective, and I've talked to a lot of evolution people, and I'm interested in what your perspective is on this, being that you're looking at it really in the intense hyper magnified level that you do. Do you believe that these mechanisms actually have purposeful function, or is their function also accidental?
So the the fitness advantage isn't so the most fit organism at all every time evolves and wins this evolutionary arms race. It's basically the one that just has just enough.
I
So
understand.
it, and that's kind of the thing. It's not necessarily like the best the
I
best
understand.
possible one. It's not going to be a Torx. It's not going to be necessarily a an organism with a Torx
I'm
screwdriver. It's going to be one with a flathead screwdriver that because it can have a dual purpose. Maybe in the biological example, maybe it can work as a heat shock protein. Maybe it can work as an antitoxin, and it has that capability in
I
order to
know.
deal with both.
I'm asking you a question before the selection happens.
Mhm.
I'm asking you, do you believe from the biological evolutionary view that you're defending, do you believe the purpose itself? I'm not saying whether it's adequate or not. I'm
Mhm.
asking you, is the purpose itself, the function itself purposeful? Does it have a purpose? Does the biological function of anything you're looking at in biology have an actual purpose, or is the purpose, its expression, what it's doing, accidental, and it just so happens to be in the environment that it is in, it's advantageous, but it's not purposefully advantageous. It's accidentally purposeful.
I mean, I don't think that there is people life will want to make other life. That is the goal of it. And I mean, this is actually what Richard Dawkins' selfish gene theory kind of like postulates, that it's actually the main driver is actually the gene, the selfish gene theory, where it's actually the gene using the organism as the driver in order to populate, rather than the organism in order
Okay.
to go
So
through.
so in short, do you believe that biology has goals?
In order to like keep on living, I would say like in that, but it's not like the bacteria is like, man, I want to or evolve into a human in
Mm-hmm.
3.8 billion years.
Mm-hmm.
It really is just trying to create and live and survive in this environment and whatever that environment is.
You mean it's just reacting? It's not really trying to do anything. It's not trial and error trying things and evaluating its errors and saying, I got to fix that. It's, you're saying, strictly chemically speaking, chemicals just do things. And from a your perspective as an evolutionary biologist, when you study things, they're just doing what they do. They're doing what nature does. So when you use the term like it's trying to survive, it's not like it's not trying to survive, it's reacting, and it either survives or not, right?
I mean,
This is a
it's one in biology, one organism is trying to for its life in order to survive, and the other organism is trying to have a lunch. It's like they are trying with everything that they have, and as an organism in order to do whatever they can, and in order to do it. That
mhm.
I do think that they are with everything. It's not just like and guess what? The ability to try would actually be something that would be an evolved trait. So you would have two populations, one that is just more kind of like, oh, I guess, we'll try when we want to, versus the other one that's like super try hard. And you would see in that environment what one would win. Maybe if it wasn't like a super like nutrient, if it was like tons of nutrients and it's very easy in order to, have that money for metabolism, maybe the tryhards would actually lose because they're trying too hard, kind of thing. And the ones that are taking it easy, they would, they maybe they would do better.
Okay, but aren't all of the behaviors from an evolutionary view completely determined by chemistry and just biology? Like you're using the term try in a
Mhm.
poetic sense, but when you say try, that's intentionality. There's no way to use the word try without some level of intention. That's what try means. It's intentional. But
It's absolutely intentional. Yeah, chemotaxis for bacteria movement is very intentional, and you would see more like bacteria evolution where you would have ones that aren't as an intentional with their chemotaxis and their gradient finding for
okay.
their chemicals, and you would see in that environment whether or not they win or not.
Okay, so you're saying strict chemistry has intent.
Um, I mean, in in creating of the bonds, or do you mean? I mean,
No. Like creating of the bonds. Let's say I do a chemistry experiment. I have intent and will and a mind to do the experiment. But when I put two chemicals together and they react or don't react, they're not intentionally reacting. They're just reacting. There's no intent for one chemical to react to the other. They just do it, right?
But we aren't chemistry. I mean, we are more than that, and that's the thing, is that there's life there. So there is like some, I think like some intentionality for sure.
Okay, but before there's life, before there's a body and a mind, or let's say, well, let's talk about vertebrates for a second. If there's a brain, you're saying the process before an animal gets a brain and a spine, the organism at the population level had random mutation. I mean, you can't possibly say it's trying to randomly mutate. It has no control over random mutation, right?
Correct. Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
but there would be some DNA polymerases that have more mutations than others. So that,
Okay.
again, that would be another thing that could be selected
Okay.
for.
Okay, but the thing is, you're in a contradiction here, because if
Okay.
all of what you're saying is built on random mutation and the organism itself has no say or matter in what random mutation happens, and if random mutation happening is the thing that starts the production of these mechanisms down the line, there really is no intention there, because the organism has no say whether or not the random mutation happens, where the random mutation happens, what trait or mutation or weird thing that happens as a result of the mutation. They don't have any say in the matter there. They don't even have a say in keeping it. That's actually the environment. Your own admission is determining whether they die or not, right? So I'm just not sure where, and you are actually in the, I would say, the minority of the people I've talked to in regards to evolution that actually took this position that there's somehow intentionality at the molecular level that has some sort of guidance system, self-evaluative guidance system toward a goal. Nobody I've ever debated, Greg, has taken that position that
Not in
that
chemistry, but not in the chemical sense, but as life, there absolutely is, like, an intentionality with chemotaxis, or there's an intentionality with trying to develop antibiotic resistance amongst the superorganism of the microbial community. Like, absolutely.
Okay, but how could you say that what you study and what you posit is that random mutation is what's responsible for whether or not an organism at the population level or individual level reacts to stimuli in a defensive way and it's able to overcome? How could you say that the cause of that is random mutation, but it's intentional? If random mutation happens to an organism and it responds to an invader, it accidentally responded to the invader because the mutation that allowed it to fight it off or whatever, that gave it some weird advantage, was an accident. It was just a happy accident from that perspective.
Yeah, because evolution happens at the population level and natural selection happens at the individual level. So this is I'm not contradicting myself. This is the difference.
No, that's not the contradiction. The contradiction is this: there's intentionality, there's no intentionality. That's the P and not P. If it's the case that random mutation is not intentional, and if it's the case that random mutation is responsible for these changes, then the changes are at the effect of non-intentional chemistry. That's it. You can't have both of them. You can't say like random mutation produces these advantageous mechanisms and also say, well, they intentionally want the mechanisms at the same time. If that was the case,
sometimes they don't need it. They don't need it. I mean, that's the whole thing. It's, again, this is all things that are tested through evolution, and in order for these questions to be answered, it happens through evolution, and these things are tested. It's not up to the organism. You're right. Like whether or not it harbors the correct capabilities, but like it is at the end of the day fighting for its life in order to survive, and or not, because that can be evolved as well.
So are you saying that there's some level of pure random mutation that happens? Let's say here's an organism, it doesn't have a heart or a brain. And it's at the population level. And you're saying that random mutation produced the start point of a direct path to millions of years later. Sorry, my other hand. Here's millions of years later. This is no heart, no brain. Random mutation happens, and a bunch of successive generations of random mutation eventually produce a very hyper-specialized workable system called the brain and a spine. You're saying that, are you saying that the populations, the successive generations, had some sort of built-in knowledge of the future of having a brain that far
No,
out?
of course not. Like I said, like the evolution is not like a staircase where humans are at the top.
Okay.
Like there are things inside of nature that we do not understand or like way better that humans can ever do. So
Yeah.
like the mantis shrimp eye, for example, has 17 different types of cones, and we have 3. You know, so they have way
Accidental.
better eyes than we do.
But no, but
No, that's not accidental at all. Because there was a group of, as they were evolving, there were groups of shrimp that could see and couldn't see IR
that's
and
accidental.
UV, and some of them survived and some
I
of
know.
them didn't.
No. I'm saying the survival isn't accidental. I grant that under your view, natural selection, the environment dictates the survival. I'm not saying the survival is accidental. I'm asking about the first step.
Yeah.
The production of an eye, the production of your own brain under this view, is from an accidental process that doesn't have any knowability of the future. In other words,
Yeah.
okay, so it's true, if there's no knowability of the future, groups of organisms don't purposefully guide themselves toward producing a brain.
They don't. If they don't. Yeah, exactly. Agreed.
Okay.
Yeah, because they don't need to.
Okay, so
But they
then
want to.
so then
Sorry.
it's true from your view, if that's true, that it means that your heart was accidentally produced, but you're saying non-accidentally kept.
No, so this is at the very end, the very beginning. Yeah. So there
Yes.
would be some random mutation that
Okay.
created some type of pumping mechanism,
Yeah.
some smooth tissue that would do that. And
But it
yeah,
has purpose, but it accidentally produces purpose.
through the population and the natural selection of the individual. Yeah.
So you're saying evolution holds a view that random processes produce hyper-specialized purpose.
It's not a random process if you're being selected for through
No,
natural
no.
selection.
You keep conflating this. I didn't ask about the survival.
They're coupled. They're coupled. That's how it evolves.
No,
Yeah.
the environment doesn't create the heart.
Yes, it does. If
No,
it
it doesn't.
need to. Yes, it does. If it
How?
doesn't need that heart, then it's not
No,
selected for.
no. You're conflating
The
this.
toxin, if the toxin in my example
No.
before, if the toxin wasn't needed, then the toxin isn't produced
How
if
could
it's not needed.
look? No. How could the environment be responsible for the generation of the heart if the environment is the thing that tells the organism that generates a heart whether it's suitable for the environment? The
Because
environment.
it could be,
The environment can't. What's the environment? The trees, the water, the external world, right?
if there was some metabolic advantage in order to have more circulating blood or something,
Hold on,
and
Greg.
you need more metabolic activity,
Greg.
then the pumping of more
Greg.
metabolism will happen. What?
No, the under the evolutionary view, the internal individual or the population doesn't respond to what it needs by way of getting information from the external world. It randomly, you can't have both of these, okay? You can't say random mutation produces appendage X, then the environment decides, well, is that suitable or not? You might die, you might not. Oh, it turns out it does something. That's cool. You get to live for a little longer. I understand that. But now you're switching it and you're saying the environment actually plays a part in the generation of the thing. No, from your view, the environment plays a part in either executing the organism because it doesn't have good features, it doesn't have survivability, or it doesn't. But it doesn't produce the thing. Random mutation, look, here's an organism. Random mutation happens and it produces some sort of effect. The effect is advantageous, right, to the environment. The environment didn't produce that appendage. The environment decided, without a mind, decided whether the appendage is suitable for the environment. The environment didn't make the appendage, didn't make the mechanism. The natural selective process determines whether or not the appendage that's created through natural selection is advantageous or not. So again, if you hold the view that random mutation produces a heart, there actually is no purpose in producing the heart. It just does produce the heart, and it does a thing, and it accidentally does an awesome thing, but it's accidental. It's from random mutation.
No,
The
it's
environment
evolutionary advantageous in order to have that, and
it
it
can't
increases the fitness. Yeah, it's not
it can't be an
accidental.
advantage if it doesn't exist. It needs to
Yeah, it
exist
can.
first.
Absolutely it can. Because
Okay.
because there could be some type of null mutation that nullifies it, just like the pseudo gene for vitamin C. Just because we have the gene to make vitamin C doesn't mean that that's going to be, constantly there. There would be, in this example, some organisms that don't have a functioning heart. And if they had an increased fitness in this environment, then they would take over the population. Absolutely.
No, I'm not talking about what dictates whether or not they win in the survival game. That you keep conflating the two. I'm trying to
That's what
get
evolution is. That is what.
no, evolution is two-part from your view. First, an organism experiences random mutation and produces X feature. Yes? First. Then the environment goes,
In a
hey,
population, again, you're in a population.
what is a
it's
population
different.
made of?
Yeah, but it's really important because there are organisms in that population that are accruing those mutations and trying this stuff out.
No, they don't.
Like in the example of the factory, there are different ones with different types of screws and different types of screwdrivers constantly trying out different stuff.
Okay.
And some of them aren't even trying out the conveyor belt at all.
I'll
They're
do it.
trying to see if that actually
I'll do it at the
helps.
population level. Okay. There's a random mutation that happens at the population level. Somehow, hold on, let me just set it out for you. At the population level of a given animal, they're a population. They already exist, they already reproduce. At the population level, all the individuals in that, or let's say a huge cluster of those individuals, all experience the same random mutation. Okay. Is that what you're saying? Random mutation happens at the
That's
population?
by definition not a random mutation, and that wouldn't be good that wouldn't be
Well,
good that wouldn't be good diversity.
Okay.
That wouldn't be a good diversity. So that wouldn't be necessarily what you would want.
So then, okay,
That would
so
be a
here's
genetic bottleneck effect,
okay.
and that would be bad.
Then this is good. This is actually worse for evolution because
Okay.
if there's a population and they don't have a heart, right? But
Mhm.
a random mutation happens somewhere in that population that starts the pathway toward producing a heart. Do you agree that happens? That had to have happened in evolution, right? A population exists, doesn't have a heart. A random mutation happens that begins the process. It doesn't
Sure.
make a heart.
Like some type of cell that would do like one
Yeah.
cell or a couple of them that
Yeah.
would do some type of pumping
Okay.
action. Sure.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. You're saying if that happens at the individual level, right? You're saying no, it happens at the population level. So I'm trying to understand this
Yeah.
in a chronological sense. If there's a population that doesn't have a heart and there's a genetic mutation that introduces the very fundamental aspect of what a heart pump is, right? The very, very basic, whatever that is, a proto something, right?
Sure.
Is that you're saying that happens at the individual, one kiddo that was born, some mutation happened and they have that? Or are you saying that particular thing must happen at a larger scale for it to continue?
Yeah, you would have different types of DNA polymerase errors. You'd have genome recombination events. You'd have double-stranded breaks that would happen inside the genome that would have, insertion or deletions and randomizing events of recombination events. So it's not just like a DNA polymerase error. You have like a ton of different ways in order to introduce mutations as a population. And this is why genetic diversity is so important at the population level and why it's so bad to go through bottlenecks, because you basically can be taken out by like a single organism, like or let's say an abiotic event like increased heat or something. So now they have to somehow increase their metabolic capability, and they're not able to because they don't have a heart or something. You know what I mean? When they could have.
It was a very simple question. There's a population. None of them have a heart, and when there is the first ever in history in this population, first ever genetic mutation that opens the little doorway that in a million years will produce a heart in the future, okay? Where does that happen, at what scale? I'm asking.
like I said, like in the opener, it would basically be at the basically you would have some type of cell, some type of protein that would be able to, do that pumping action. And maybe it's like some other function. Maybe it's like a, wing or something, or I have no idea what it,
wing,
could
yeah.
be. Or something like that. Yeah, evolution. Yeah, we could have like some type of like inversion that happens that creates something. I don't. And basically the idea would be at the population level, the ones that created that pumping action, and if that was evolutionarily fit,
No, hold on a second.
Other,
hold
that would
on.
be what it is.
Okay, but hold on. Let's shrink it down for the sake of vision, for the sake of conception of it. Okay, there's 100 population, 100 unit population. Now let's pretend that actually represents like a million. Okay, just for the sake of argument, I'm actually granting a million something of something. But just to conceptualize it, let's reduce it to 100 just for the fraction.
Okay.
There's 100 things, and they don't have a heart. And you're saying the random mutation happens to kick off this starting point of creating what we call the heart today, super functional thing. The process of creating that over time starts with one mutation that happens either in one or a couple of the individuals of the 100, right?
Yeah, that could be a DNA polymerase error, it could be a genome recombination event. It's not necessarily a single nucleotide polymorphism. It would be
Okay, but the thing is, how would an individual or a couple of individuals with this mutation know whether there was any level of beneficiality or not, right? Because you would admit, if this happened in an instance in a population, that little mutation wouldn't actually tell you or the organism whether it's advantageous. It would just be totally, what's the word where it's like neither here nor there, I forgot the word. Not
silent,
null. No.
Silent mutation.
This is going to kill me not knowing this word. But anyway, it's
called silent. It's called the silent.
Negligible. Negligible.
Okay.
Negligible. So if it's negligible at that first thing, you have to say in your head, going back in time, a narrative where it says no. Well, the thing is, the couple of individuals in that population who had the same genetic mutation that would eventually be the heart, the reason they kept it was advantageous, but at that point it would be totally negligible. They wouldn't know whether it was advantageous or not.
It would be advantageous at that stage, even at that's first step.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
This means that a penis growing from the evolutionary view has to have an advantage every step of the way.
No, you don't need to have a phallus at all. And some, like for example, grouper fish, for example, they spread their eggs on a rock.
Do we need
they eject their sperm onto that rock. So it's
stop.
actually
Stop. I didn't say are there other things that don't have penises?
Yeah.
You and I have a penis, right? You have a penis?
Okay.
Okay. Wait, do you? You said okay.
I don't know.
Okay.
Why do you care?
Well, because I want to make sure we know what we're talking about.
Okay.
If you have a penis and I have a penis and we come from an animal that doesn't, right? We can't have sex without a penis, right? That's what we know about humans. From the evolutionary view, there has to be a moment in time where some ancestor of ours started the process of growing a penis, right?
Yeah,
now,
like
if you're
sexpilus, it's been happening for like in animals for a long time. It's the ability to specifically choose where your sperm is going to go. So it happens in a lot of different organisms, not just like mammals.
Well, I didn't ask if it happens. It has to, if evolution is true, it had to have not happened first, and then it starts happening.
You can have things evolve together.
Eternal penis?
That happens. No, this happens all the time with like flowers and proboscises in butterflies, for example. As like the nectar gets lower and lower and closer to where the flower needs in order for reproduction to happen, the proboscis gets lower too. So it happens. They evolve together at the same time.
So according to your view, the beginning of penis and vagina sex starts with not needing penis and vagina sex, totally reproducing in-house, totally fine. You got it going on, in-house factory, right? And from your view, random mutation kicks off and accidentally through random mutation starts a dimple in what wouldn't even be a female at that point. Maybe it would be a dimple that would eventually be the vagina. and a nub that would eventually be the penis. And you're saying random mutation actually started that process, and the organisms at the population level kept their nub and kept their dimple for millions of years toward functionality, right? But even though, watch this, even though whatever the female is developing independent of the thing that already gives them reproduction, and the male who's growing a penis, even though they already have this other thing you said that acts as the penis, they grow these things independently, unrelated to each other. And voila, at the end of the baking period called evolution, this thing happens to work perfectly with this thing.
This happens all the time in nature. So this happens, like,
What?
for example, with like mongoose and rattlesnake venom, right? So as the rattlesnake venom gets stronger and stronger, the mongoose and their antitoxins will actually increase as well. So they go back and forth, back and forth. Yeah. So like,
wait.
like,
How is that? Wait a second. How is that analogous? The ability for the mongoose to develop some resistance to rattlesnake venom. How is that analogous to two different organisms of the same species that already have the capability of having sex, independently growing a nub that'll eventually be a dick and a dimple that'll eventually be an internal vagina, even though you just said, well, they probably had the ability to have sex already without them. They just do both until the penis is done, right? That's what you have to believe, is that the penis, independent of the vagina, in a species that are already having sex, because they have to be able to have sex to be able to live long enough to grow a penis, right? Millions of years, reproduction without the penis. Millions of years of reproduction without the penis or the vagina has to be the case under this view. Now, if that's the case, how what do you mean? No, of course.
Sexual production, like this, like sexual reproduction and the ability to choose a mate would be something that would be chosen under this model, right? It wouldn't be like some
I don't think
type,
you
like
heard what I
the grouper
said.
fish.
I don't think you understood what I said. Here's what the future of a man would be. Here's the future of a female. You're saying that, yes, under the evolutionary view, this population of species, whatever it is, has to be alive and reproduce during the time period that's required to grow evolutionarily, grow a fully formed functioning penis. So the thing is, the organism has to be able to reproduce on its own, totally fine, survive totally on its fine. And on the shelf, they're developing a penis and a vagina, but it doesn't do anything yet.
So
it doesn't do anything.
It would be like 7 million years ago or something, when we were more like, we are apes as humans, but maybe like we have different, stages of our hip placement or something like that. The ability to have a phallus is, it gives some type of evolutionary advantage, so that the uterus could be the uterus would be farther back, so then it could be larger and gave some type of fitness advantage, and that's actually a big problem with Homo sapiens in general, is because of like our hip placement, and that's where like the brain kind of like it's a huge limiting fact. So I would probably say that the phallus length, which is abnormally large for our humans, for mammals, for our size, is basically it probably was contingent on the ability for humans to have lower death rate during childbirth. That's what I would assume.
Yeah, that's a big assumption. It's basically a story. Really, the question is, it's really simple. If there's a population that can already reproduce without the penis and the vagina, it has to necessarily be the case that they keep reproducing without the penis and the vagina, and eventually the penis and the vagina are done cooking, so to speak, and they get to be put on the target shelves and finally used. Now, the other alternative...
That's not how it works. That's not what I'm saying.
No. Here's the alternative. Let me just say the alternative. The alternative is every step of the way for the penis and the vagina is useful and sufficient for reproduction. Every step of the way.
I would think so. Yeah, I mean, necessarily so, right? Between us and where mammals were 100 million years ago, obviously on every step of the way, the phallus length was, absolutely, enough for the
Here's the thing.
the fallopian
Here's the thing.
tubes.
Fine, let's go with that. Why would it be an advantage for the female who ultimately their goal is to reproduce? Why would it be an advantage to dig a hole deeper
Like I said, it would be something to do with like hip placement or something like that in order to actually open up the canal in order to birth humans, which are it's hard, and we have like a really
Oh,
hard rate in order
oh.
to be born because
Well,
our head development, our heads are
well,
too large, and that's
well, you
why we
gotta.
actually are born like a developmentally very early because of that.
Okay, but yeah, but the thing is, now you got a bigger problem, which is there had to be a time where the placenta and the whole birth thing of birthing for humans actually wasn't the way things were happening.
Yeah, mammalian placental like evolution is like well documented, and there's lots of different types.
Wait,
Absolutely.
wait, 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 hold on a second. That you just said that, well, there's a lot of things out there. What I'm
Yeah, lots
saying
of
is,
different types of like
no, no,
birthing.
no. You have to tell me now, right? First of all, we have this sexual problem of like two forms of sex, right? Whereas if you go back far enough, you're going to eventually converge to something that's hermaphroditic, right? And asexual, right?
What?
Asexual, right?
I mean, 700 million years
Yeah,
ago, like was the
yeah.
creation of
Creation.
eukaryotes. Yeah, and then we're
Wait,
talking about
creation?
yeah,
What's
yeah.
what do you mean a creation?
They were like intelligently designed by
No, no,
evolution.
no. No. Hold on a second. Hold on. I know. I
No,
know. I'm just getting you on a
there
word. It's funny.
3.8 billion years ago is
Uh-huh.
our oldest fossilized evidence of cyanobacteria. So there's 3.8 billion years ago to 700 million years ago,
Okay.
that's when eukaryotes like started evolving.
Right, right. They just came on the scene like
They evolved,
arbitrarily.
yeah.
Yeah, they just showed up, but we don't have a
They evolved.
justification. Well, what do you mean? They means they already existed. So, is there a point where something needs to exist in order to evolve?
I mean, there was life, there was
There
bacteria, and
was
then
life.
there was
Mhm.
and then they was some of them had like a megalovirus endosymbiotic event, and then that's what happened. Yeah.
Wait, that's what happened?
We haven't like seen a eukaryote without a nucleus, so yeah.
Okay. So, the first organisms could reproduce like
Asexually, yeah.
massively, asexually.
Yeah.
And random mutation said, listen, even though, like you said, you're using less money, less calories, it's actually advantageous, would you agree, to reproduce internally, right? In-house?
I mean that's the problem, is that you create less mutations. So that kind of like is,
Wait. Hold on. This is circular now. Okay. I just want
no.
one word answer for this part, if you don't mind. Is it an advantage to reproduce asexually in-house? Risk um risk is down, right? You don't have to fight for a mate. You you basically everything's happening in-house, right? So isn't
No,
that
it's
an
not an
advantage?
advantage. Not
Why not?
necessarily. Not necessarily, because you'd be create a genome minimizing event. That's exactly the bottleneck effect, where now
Okay.
if you have a population of bacteria, okay, and they did was asexual reproduction, then the environment, or a predator or something else is going to select for whether or not that's
Okay.
advantageous.
Well,
And sometimes that's not, right?
wait,
Because
hold on a
you
second.
need to introduce like some
Hold
type
on.
of genetic mutations,
Look,
and through horizontal gene transfer,
it
for
has to be
example. That's why.
it has to be the case that what an animal or population is doing, in this case, asexual reproduction, it has to be the case from your view that the reason it's doing it is that it is an advantage.
In some cases, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
But if you
Okay.
had a population that only did asexual reproduction, that would be tested within the environment.
Okay, hold on. If it's mostly the case that asexual reproduction was an advantage, you're inserting an arbitrary time where it's no longer an advantage. So what is that time where it's suddenly no longer an advantage?
When it's selected for. So within that's yeah, and who knows how long they could have been.
Okay,
But yeah,
hold on.
it's the
Okay.
ability for that ability to be selected for
Hold on.
within the environment.
Now you're changing the cause again. And this is something I always watch out for with people defending evolution, which is this. Random mutation happens and it produces things, either advantageous or not. Now, that whole thing's in question, but I'm just going to grant it for the hypothetical. Random mutation happens and it produces this ability, traits, ability, appendages, features. the environment dictates whether or not it's truly an advantage. They're going to be the deciding factor. They're the judge. No mind, but they're the judge. They're going to go, no, didn't work in this environment. Okay, I understand that. But the problem is, when I asked you, isn't it an advantage up to the point where it's not, that in-house reproduction, asexual, is an advantage? You say, yes, it's an advantage until it's not. I go, well, how would you know it's not? And you said, sexual or natural selection, the environment decides if it's not. But here's where you're in trouble, is because if it's an advantage up to that point and suddenly the environment says it's not, that's when you say in your narrative things die off, because they're not doing something that's compatible with the environment. But now you're changing it. Now you're saying the environment whispers to the organism and says, guys, you need to pick up the pace. It's not doing well for you. This is how things die. And they go, suit up, lads. Let's create a random mutation that splits our sexual process into two.
That's the genetic diversity, what I was talking about, why it's so important, and why if you had a population that only asexual reproduced, you wouldn't have that diversity. So that's the whole point. You need that genetic diversity in the population in order to do this.
No, dude, look. There has to be a reason you then splinter off into genetic diversity. If you're saying the reason is they ran up into a wall called the external world, the thing that's judging whether they're doing it or not, right? They either get killed or not, right? That's your whole paradigm, is the animals we see today exist because they survived, because random mutation produced things that were constantly advantageous to the world. And the ones that died were at the effect of not climbing the ranks, and they got killed off by the environment. But now you're doing a contradiction, because now you're saying the reason we split from asexual to two parts, right? What would you call that properly? Just so
eukaryotic evolution?
No, just the distinction between female, male, and asexual, like the category.
Sexual reproduction?
Yeah, like the reproduction between two versus just one, asexual.
Yeah,
so anyway.
Sexual reproduction, yeah.
Okay, so there's asexual, and I go, what gives the split? If things are going so well doing asexual reproduction, from the evolutionary view, you have to say there's a moment where it's split from asexual to something else. And you said, no, that's what we believe. We believe that it needed to.
It's no. Bacteria did not just do asexual reproduction.
I understand.
There's tons of naturally competent. They take up environmental DNA. They take up lots of different stuff.
We're not talking about bacteria. We're talking about organisms that we're going beyond. I'm granting you way more than bacteria right now. I'm granting you a type of animal that's able to reproduce. Like currently, there's like a lizard that reproduces asexually, yeah. Right. So I'm granting you that there's a type of animal, like whether it's a mammal or a lizard, I don't care. There's a population that reproduces asexually. It reproduces asexually, and it's proven to be advantageous, right? It is. That's why it's doing it. It's able to reproduce. That's advantageous. Producing is better than not producing, right? Reproducing. So, okay, it's an advantage. When I ask you, when is it no longer an advantage? You say when it needs to change, right? But the thing is, animals from the evolutionary view, they don't need to change. They either change and they're rewarded by the environment, or they change and they're not. It just happens. Like there's no, we need to figure this out, guys. It's not working anymore. So when I asked you, Dr. Greg, when is it the asexual organisms that would eventually become us, when did they split off and why? You have to actually say, to be consistent with your view, Greg, you have to say, there's actually no reason why they did. Just random mutation made them do it. It just happened to be a good move, but that just happened.
Yeah, you'd have two populations of ones that did more or less asexual reproduction, and they would be tested to whether or not it was fitter or not. That's just what it is.
Okay, so if that's the case, all of the things that we have, that we do, all the heart, the liver, the lungs, the brain, you're saying is a product. It's a result of surviving. The reason we have a brain is because random mutation set off this pathway to producing a brain, and producing a brain in the end was advantageous because the environment said, dude, the things with the brain are doing pretty good right now, right? That's why it survived.
By definition, every one of our ancestors lived and reproduced. Yes.
I understand, but the brain itself didn't develop with any purpose. It just developed purposelessly, and it just happens to produce a really good trait.
No, it didn't do it purposely. Like it did its thing, and it conferred some fitness advantage to some organisms, and that's what happened.
Right.
Yeah.
So if it follows it didn't do it purposely, it follows that the brain actually doesn't have any real purpose in its development. It just happens to produce an outcome where the environment rewards it. It actually doesn't have a purpose.
You don't, well, if it's not selected for, you don't need to have everything that exists right now is as evolved as anything else. So but plants, for example, do communication amongst the community. They can grow, they can withstand predators. They don't have like a central nervous system, for example, but they're just as evolved as we are.
That's right. So they're not purposeful. There's no direction to the use of their things. They just live, and they do it well, but there's no purpose to it. They just live. It's not a purpose.
What do you mean by purpose? What do you mean by purpose?
A direction, like a purpose, like a goal, like I have a purpose in life. From a strict biological view, they don't have a purpose. They just are doing what they chemically do, and the environment is like, you win. You're doing something that happens to be suitable with this environment. If they were in another environment that wasn't this environment, they maybe wouldn't do well with the same exact traits. It just depends on the environment. So if that's true, then everything that's in our body accidentally manifests through random mutation, and it's accidentally useful. It's accidentally useful. Not purposefully useful, it's accidentally useful.
No, again, the natural selection isn't accidental. That's the thing.
No, not dude. Oh my gosh, dude. This is so frustrating.
They are coupling. They are coupled. They are.
No, you keep conflating you keep conflating
the random mutations that created, the toxins or the antitoxin.
Yeah.
They're tested. You could have someone that's born without a heart nowadays as a human, and you'd see whether or not that mutation is actually good or not, and you would see.
Okay, what part of the external environment dictates whether a heart that doesn't work makes the person survive or not?
So you can have abiotic or biotic reasons. So abiotic, you could have climate, you could have something that's not biological. So
hold on,
biological would be viruses or something that is a predator, that kind of thing.
Look, like God forbid, child is born, they're put on the table.
Mm-hmm.
They die because of some heart defect,
mm-hmm.
right? To say the word defect means that the heart has purpose, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
If the heart has purpose, then it has purpose independent of the environment. The environment.
Wouldn't you say the same thing with the eyes? Like, wouldn't the eyes, we literally see that right now in evolution, that there are organisms that evolved like to have mutations in their eyes so that they're not functional. It's just a source of infection, and they're useless. So the eyes literally go away.
Okay, but
evolution.
Yeah.
So would you agree with that?
Well, yeah. You're actually getting closer to what I want you to concede on, which is this. There's no rhyme or reason why random mutation produces these things. It's just a lottery, and the environment tells you, okay, you produce something accidentally that actually really works really well for you. Like, good job, even though you didn't do it. Good job, random mutation produced workable eyes, and you survived. It wasn't intentional.
Your mic turned off, or mine did?
I think it was Jim Bob's. Jim Bob, did you pull a plug on accident? If you haven't yet, folks.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
All good now. I can hear you.
Go ahead and plug. You can plug, James. Sorry. Go ahead.
If you haven't yet, hit that like, folks. No matter where you're watching, hit like. Go ahead, gentlemen.
Okay.
And we have I would say maybe 9 more minutes, and we got to go to the Q&A.
Okay. So this is what I'm trying to get to. I understand that your view, nothing's accidental in the end because the environment is the strict judge on these things. I'm trying to argue with you before that happens. Like, the environment can't be the judge of something until there's something to judge, right? Make sense? The environment can't say, that doesn't work, you guys, you suck. It can't kill you if it's not determining whether or not the thing that you have is workable or not. So I'm
Okay.
trying to get you to distinguish between that happening. I understand that's what's happening from your view. The environment is going, you don't have good shit, dude. You got to go. I
Mhm.
understand that. But in order for that to happen, you need to suppose a whole group of organisms have types of things. They have either functional eyes or they have not functional eyes. They either have a brain
Mm.
or they don't have a brain. I'm saying
No,
that
so they have genetic diversity, and they have within within this is, I mean, this is the codon usage bias thing. So you basically have within genomes, you have accrued nucleotide changes that some of them make the same amino acids. So that's why they're called a silent mutation, because they don't actually change the amino acids, so they don't change the protein. But you
yeah.
need these things in order to accrue, and you need to have that genetic diversity. So then when something does happen, or there is something going on, you have those things to work with, so that a genome recombination event or a polymerase error could create a fitness advantage.
Okay, I understand. It's not by chance that things survive. I understand.
Mhm.
I'm asking, is it by chance that they produce things?
They produce. No, no, it's actually evolved. People have, organisms have specific codon usage biases. They select specifically which triplet of nucleotides will make which amino acid and create the protein. So it's not random
Okay.
what they create.
Okay, so is a random mutation random?
Yeah.
Okay. Does a
But the
random
mutations aren't all the same. That's the thing, is that
Okay.
some mutations create stop codons. Some of them will create something that which a stop codon would effectively end the creation of that protein, which would terminate, obviously the creation and use of that in the population.
Okay.
Or some of them are silent or whatever. There's lots of different types.
Is there any type of mutation that produces something that's workable? Is there any mutation that produces something workable in an organism or a population that isn't random, that isn't a random categorized as a random mutation?
Yeah, you could have a recombination event. You could have a double-stranded break that happens. You could have, some type of it's not necessarily single changes.
Okay. And then how do you agree that there is such a thing called random mutation?
Yeah, the DNA polymerase errors or it does happen.
And how did you determine, by what methodology does your field of study determine something's random?
I guess you would see that event play out, for a certain period of time, and then you'd measure that.
Wait. So you're saying randomness versus unrandomness is based on an arbitrary length of observation?
Well, we can't do experiments forever. I mean, we have DNA polymerase errors that we can assume, based off of other criteria. For example, I mean, right now we basically pull things out, that gene out, DNA polymerase, and then we'll see kind of like how many errors are created in the creation of like an amplicon for a polymerase chain reaction or something.
Okay, so the question,
we molecularly figure it out in vitro outside of like the organism.
Okay, the question is, how did anyone determine, because the term is used now, right? So you're using the term, someone else coined the term, you learned the term through your schooling, right? You're using it. How did and who did determined something called a random mutation is in fact random? How did they determine that?
Well, I mean, they do have some type of, like, they can have biases, some like over some versus the other. They're not like 100% truly random in that case.
Okay, so if they're not truly random, how would you determine that they're random at all then?
Because you can observe them like through specifically like highly conserved areas that wouldn't normally change. They wouldn't be selected for normally, cytochrome C, 16S sequencing. So then you would see, whether or not those or those silent mutations have been accrued, and the rate at which the silent mutations that accrued over time, you would see like, okay, we're seeing more A's than G's here, for example.
Okay, this is not the question isn't what you're looking at. The question is, what's the criteria you use to determine what you're looking at is random or not random? It sounds like you just said, well, you look at these things and then you see what they do. Well, I'm asking you a different question. What's the criteria you use, or criterion if it's a set of things, to determine something that you're observing in nature? In this case, it's DNA, but it could be anything. How do you determine you're actually looking at something random?
I mean, you would the assumption wouldn't be that it would be random. You have to prove that through experimentation.
Well, how would you use experimentation to determine something's random? It just still doesn't answer the methodological question. If there is such a thing as something called random in nature, whether it's DNA or anything else, I'm asking you, what's the methodology and criteria for determining it's random? You said an experiment. That doesn't tell me
Yeah,
what
you'd
the
look through
how you
sequencing data. You'd look
how,
through
yeah.
sequencing data in order to see what it is.
How okay. When you look through sequencing data, how do you determine there's two sequences of data? How do you determine any one of them is random when you look at it?
Well, you don't just look through two sequences, you look through millions and millions of them.
Okay,
And then
how
you
do
would
you
see, and then you would look at the frequency of those mutations over time in the conserved regions. Like I said,
and
you
how would you
see
determine? No,
A's or T's
bro,
or C's or
bro,
G's, and for in regards to that, and you
bro.
would see what population
Greg,
is amongst them.
Greg, you just said you look at the things. I'm asking you, I'm
Yeah.
granting you that you look at things, all right? When I say, when you look at the things, how do you determine they're random? And you said you look at the things. I'm asking you a method. How do you look at all of those things, whether they're millions or not? How do you determine anything you're looking at is random?
Well, I mean, all that you would do, you would have to do sequencing data, and you would have to look at it. You would have to see whether
Look at
or
it.
not. Yeah, you would have to observe it. Yes. Yeah.
No. Well, I'm observing something right now.
Yeah.
How do I determine what I'm observing is random?
I
Yeah.
mean, you would look at the DNA, and then you would see whether or
Look
not
at it.
how the DNA changes over time. So, like,
How-
for example, it isn't fully random where things are in the genome. Like, for example, there's highly conserved areas that don't change randomly. They're
How
actually
do you know
conserved
that?
because they're very, very conserved, because they
Two-minute
are
warning.
they're very intricately involved in a specific process, and a single nucleotide change, that actually conferred a change would be deleterious, and they would die. That's why.
okay.
Cytochrome C is involved in mitochondria, and a 16S ribosomal sequencing is in the creation of proteins. So it's like
Yeah.
if you had mutations in that, you wouldn't be able to bind and create proteins, for example, in a microbial population.
Well, it still doesn't tell me the methodology for determining this, the criteria.
That is the method. That's literally the method. You use
no.
16S ribosomal sequencing in
You're
order
not,
to do it.
you're not listening, Greg. I'm asking you the criteria for determining something goes in random category and not. It sounded like you said you look at it, and ultimately, if it doesn't produce something that you understand, then it's random.
No, I mean, we look and see, like, what's changing here, and there's different A, C, T's, and G's that are being produced, and then you see that, like, wow, this wasn't the case in this generation, and then now in this generation that we sequence, now it's changed. What has changed? Well, the only thing that has actually changed would be the creation of new DNA.
Okay,
and you would that would be the hypothesis that you would have to show.
Yeah, but
This
the thing
would be
is,
a good time to go to the Q&A.
okay, we'll just finish with looking at stuff I'm granting you at whatever level or whatever volume of data you're looking at. I'm totally granting you're looking at it. But going through the thing you're looking at and saying, you know what, this section I declare as random, I didn't get from you the criteria that you declare this set of things is random and the rest aren't random. I didn't get that from you. You look at more stuff and you arbitrarily look at it and say, I understand this is what's happening, and this is a change, and this is not a change, and this is continuous, and this is not continuous. But that's a bigger question, because I hold of you, Greg, you actually, nobody has access to observable randomness. The reason is because when I ask you, well, what's the criteria? You don't have an answer. The proper answer is we actually really don't know what's random or not random. That's the proper answer. We actually don't know because there's no criteria.
Okay.
This one, we're going to jump into the Q&A. I know that there's more that you'd like to say, gentlemen, so I do appreciate you letting me transition. Folks, thank you very much for your questions. I have to mention, our guests are linked in the description box. If you've enjoyed listening this long, which you probably have if you're still here, you can find more of Jim Bob and Dr. Greg at the links in the description box. That includes the podcast. A lot of people, I don't know if you know, we have a podcast. We always upload the debate, so you can find it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, you name it. You can find Dr. Greg's and Made by Jim Bob's links in the podcast description as well. With that, we're going to jump into these questions. Thank you very much. We're going to try to move through these quickly as we have a pretty good amount. This one, Big League Drew, I'm going to read several of these in a row because he fired 4 in a row. He said, not too early. Thank you very much. How does bleaching your hair affect your genes? I guess he just bleached his hair. Big League Drew, if you really want to answer, you can. He says, if you create something in a lab that's never been seen in nature, how does that support your claim of natural evolution? I think that's for you, Dr. Greg.
Yeah, I mean, there's like natural and artificial selection that happens, and the creation of all these dogs over such a small period of time is actually a great example of the power of these mutations, because actually the size difference between a Chihuahua and a Great Dane is 1 gene. So you can actually, basically mutations inside of like a promoter for the canine growth factor made such a big difference. You would observe that in nature, and that would be something that you'd hypothesize and see and connect to.
Big League Drew also says, we looked at the boners, I mean bones. Thank you for that. Brian Peck says, Jim, there's not just one scientific method, right?
Actually, I didn't even get into that. I actually hold that Greg is actually doing proper science because he's manipulating things. I do hold that there is actually one scientific method. If your scientific method includes other things, it still needs one important thing, and that's experiment. And I'm glad that I finally get to talk to an evolution proponent who actually does experiments.
This one from, do appreciate your question. Justin Henley says, Dr. Greg, you said we evolved from making our own vitamin C. So if there were starving populations in the world we just barely kept alive, they could evolve to survive with less, right? Sounds moral.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, that would be like an interesting, if there was a population that needed vitamin C in order to survive, creating some type of like human gene editing, in order to make that vitamin C for the first time. I mean, that would be amazing. You would actually see that in vitamin A deficiency with eye development and golden rice, but that didn't take hold in Africa because of anti-genetically modified organism propaganda. But that is an example of it.
You got it. This one. Thank you very much. Ben Renhawk says, Jim Bob, learn what a continuum fallacy is, you regard. What's the continuum fallacy?
I know the continuum fallacy, but I actually didn't argue that tonight at all. The continuum fallacy is basically arguing that because there's a gradient, there's nothing you're pointing to as a referent that actually is true. For instance, like there actually is no mountain of sand, because you can't tell me when the mountain of sand becomes the mountain of sand. But this is different because it's actually the evolution proponent who's affirming the objectivity of said categories. And I'm just asking them how do they know they exist? I'm actually sowing doubt. I didn't say they don't exist. I said I'm actually cross-examining the person with the affirmative. And a lot of times evolution proponents will actually just concede. There is no objective standard for a species. It's arbitrary. There's all these exceptions, so they don't really know. It's fluid. Same thing with a clade. Well, that puts something in doubt, and that's all I'm doing here is putting things in doubt. So I didn't need to run into the continuum fallacy. So
you got it. This one from Amanda says, we'll see you at liturgy, Dr. Greg. And this one from In Their Shoes Apologetics says, while not proof, the evidence for evolution is overwhelming to vote no. The interpretation of these evidences is what makes the difference. It was more of an objection than a question. Dr. Greg, do you have thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, according to the definition of, the evolution is the allele frequency change in a population over time. I mean, I was actually surprised that Jim Bob actually agrees that the DNA does change over time in a population. So he basically does concede that evolution does exist. So
Well, that's just
it's a time period problem, right?
yeah, no,
We can't observe billions of years, so and that's
no.
kind of the problem. So
No. The thing is, if evolution is defined as just changes in allele frequency, that's an observation. The thing that I disagree with, which is smuggled into evolution, if you just defined evolution as, look, there's changes in frequency. Yeah, but that doesn't tell you how you justify massive changes between full categories and clades of things, full categories of an animal that, like a Pakicetus, changes in allele frequency happen over time. The claim is changes in allele frequency over time causes Pakicetus to eventually, through successive genes, turn into a whale. That's a bigger claim, admittedly, Greg, than changes in allele frequency exist, right?
it's the same mechanism that causes it. And honestly, man, I think in another life that you're a taxonomist and you're giving conferences and you're a scientist, so you're defining what it is and you're making those arguments at conferences. So I can't like you're right. And like I said before, like walking a dozen feet versus a mile. The what a mile is and what a dozen is arbitrary, but we have like some parameters on like what a species are, and
Not
we just- that's what
objectively.
it is. Yeah, we do. Yeah,
Not objectively, no. Species is not objective. No.
I mean, okay. I mean,
It's not, it's just not. It's just not. I searched far and wide, found the best representatives of evolution. Species itself is not objective. Every single variable or bullet point or criterion you would list for a species, there's another exception. A perfect example is, well, there's a bunch of lizards that share DNA. Are they a species? Is there a new one that's a species? Well, there's one lizard. If a species is a population of animals that could reproduce in isolation, if a lizard could reproduce with itself, it actually doesn't need the population that it's in. So is each lizard its own unique species altogether? That puts the whole entire taxonomical system in a relativistic view. And if it's relativistic, it's hard to really say objectively that this the thing called speciation, especially arguments for clades, are objective. You have to just concede they're not, but this is the best we have, and we're just kind of running with the story that there's a thing called species that's objective. That's what biting the bullet would be.
I think that you would never see a completely different cytochrome C sequence for two different organisms and have anyone argue that they're the exact same species. I mean, I guess your argument holds true in like a morphological evidence, but not in a molecular one.
This one from, do appreciate it. Manor Clip says, Dr. Greg looks like Kyle Kulinski. You ever heard that before?
I haven't.
Wow.
And I'm offended.
You know what I could see?
You should.
Jim Bob, did you
I
agree?
actually-
What were you going to say?
No. Because I like Dr. Greg much better, I'm gonna defend him and say don't say that about him.
Yeah, I defend myself with jujitsu, and I don't run to firearms to defend myself.
Wow. Very Batman-like. Big Drew says, where does consciousness fit into the evolutionary timeline? How does evolution explain it?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, it's hard to say. Like what is it? I don't know. I would say that every single time that we've tried to define it, we've been wrong. And the problem is humans are so human brained that we can't understand other types of organisms. And like I said before, I mean, even there's referential communication with other animals, right? That they can use communication with one another, like honeybees do this, and plants, for example, communicate when they have when they're hurt, or they don't have a central nervous system, so they don't feel pain, but something bad is happening to them, so they actually send down micronutrients to their root microbiome, and the entire forest kind of like communicates to one another with what's actually happening. So is that a form of consciousness? Is the forest communicating with one another? When you smell fresh cut grass, that's a damage control response where they're basically signaling to one another that something is happening to them. So it's hard. I'd say it's very hard to say.
Greg, I have a quick question here. if there is granted a thing called species, and you
Hmm.
agree in nature there are things called invasive species, do you agree?
Hmm. Yeah.
And it's a natural reaction for one species to get rid of the other species, even if they share similarities, right?
Well, the invasive species model, it means that they can't. They can't deal with that predator. They're
Well,
not
I mean, I
capable.
know, but if they could deal with the invasive species by some way of defense or offense, that would be totally natural, right? Under
Yeah.
this model. Okay, so why is it you categorize humans differently than the rest of the plant and animal kingdom when if there is a case where there's an invasive species, but the species itself is human, why would it be wrong from your view for a set of humans to defend themselves or even aggress on other humans if under the evolutionary model that would be totally justified?
Yeah, because we operate outside of like in our communities we operate outside of like strict evolutionary principles. That I
Why?
mean we've come out above that. Because man, it's like that's just because I can rear naked choke someone in the middle of the street doesn't mean that I should and I can. And
Well,
that's crazy.
wouldn't it be advantageous to not elevate beyond that?
No, man, because we create new knowledge by investing resources into things like science and the acquisition of new knowledge. That is like something. It is a privilege for us to actually be able to, as a society, build things up that's outside of our lifespan. So that is what is amazing about science is that we are creating knowledge not just for this lifespan, but for hopefully other researchers in the future that can look back and see what we did.
Yeah,
This
but
is
we're
a
just apes.
I hate to do it. We just have so many
Hmm.
questions. Max V says, Jim Bob, what's the shape of the Earth? Only flat or globe are acceptable answers.
Globe.
This one from
Triangle.
this one. Let's see. Balance Elemental says, this is Jim Bob versus Kyle Kulinski disguised as Craig. K Khan says, what is your favorite pizza? Please don't be smug. He's serious. He asks this every time. I always say pepperoni. It's never gonna change. What do you guys say?
Mm.
Yeah, pepperoni for me, man. I don't know what it is about it. It's so good.
Mm.
I would go with that too. I sometimes add the whole meat thing, like
Yeah.
sausage, but it has to be good, like well made sausage. Can't just be like crap. But
Agreed.
pepperoni, yeah.
This is the way. Kirk Key says, for each, what is the Earth's age and how do you know?
Man, I think what is it like 4.7 billion years? I actually don't know like what it exactly is. And I would say I don't ask me, ask the scientific method and the scientists that studied it for their entire life. I don't know.
I have a short comment. I know, James, you're rushing along, but the same question I have for that question I have for
Mhm.
evolution, which is like, how do you know the beginning of a clade? Well, looking at the Earth, the age of the Earth, that means there was a conception of the Earth, but under the certain models,
Mhm.
the Earth comes from a bunch of other material that precedes the shape of the Earth, and it comes together. So you have to arbitrarily say the Earth started here. Like, is it this big? Is it this big? Is it a certain shape? Does it need one more glob to it? What's kind of interesting when you dive into the philosophy of this is that there is no way to tell from a position of eternality of matter where the beginning of the Earth's body is. Like it's born like a baby, right? You can't actually say, and here's the beginning of the Earth because it's gradual, just like evolution. That's why you can't have the beginning of humans. You can't know the beginning of humans. You can't know just the way you can't know the beginning of the Earth because the model is gradual, nominal, accumulative. It's gradualism all the way down.
You
I
got it.
wish I could see the all billion years of the Earth's history too, man. I wish I could, but I can't.
This one from Big League Drew. How is abiogenesis different from being created from clay?
Mm, created from clay. I mean, I mean, I don't know. I don't study the creation of life. I think that honestly, the new Denu and the new stuff for that asteroid and finding those small pieces of things that could eventually turn into RNA. I think that's like a really interesting new development that's happened within the last couple of months. But I think it's interesting how like RNA can create protein and enzymatic functions just by having a 3D function. And I think that it's incredible. So I think it's a really cool thing that we can we're starting, and there is like research that is going in that direction. So it is awesome.
You got it. Thank you very much for this question. Bubblegum Gun says, daily reminder that Jim Bob is too scared to debate me.
Was that bubblegum again?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll just concede. I'm afraid of you. It's just easier to do it this way.
This one from Handsome Cat says, Jim Bob believes humans were made from clay because ancient goat-herding Jews who thought the earth was flat wrote it. He's a knuckle-dragging imbecile.
Well, I was determined evolutionarily to believe that, so I can't help it.
Big League Drew strikes again, says, this is my last super chat for a while. Just saw my bank statement. Just wanted to say, everyone, please pray for MXXD. Peace be with you. Kevin Blackwell says, for Jim Bob, have you read Probability Zero? It covers the mathematical impossibility of evolution by random mutation and neutral mutation.
I didn't. I know I've seen his previous work on that, writing essays on the mathematical problem. And if someone can summarize it, or maybe I'll do an audiobook. Maybe Greg, you should. You know, you're busy with sciencey stuff, but this is a counter to evolution by way of math and probability. And I don't know if you spend time battling back. I know you're debating now, but battling back people who are trying to counter, or you're just kind of immersed in your own stuff.
Yeah, no, I'm down. I mean, I think the answer to that would be like, what is all the directions that this remote can go when I drop it? And basically infinite, right? You could have any other direction from this if I drop it, but there is only one direction that naturally explains, and it's a down, right? There is only one way, and so that is that same process can be, through evolution, basically.
This one from do appreciate it. Kevin Blackwell says, for Jim Bob, have you? I read that. Felix says, for thank you for your kind words, Felix. All credit to the debaters. Handsome Cat says, paternity testing uses DNA to prove relation, yet this moron Jim Bob can't believe that DNA proves relation to other species, in turn proving evolution.
Well, it doesn't really say much, because in order to use paternity tests, the reason they work is because you do have access to the referent that you're trying to test. You have access to the father. That's why it works. But the further you go back in time, and even Dr. Greg would probably agree with me, the relation extends beyond direct lineage and goes into just DNA overlap and similarity. Like you said, a banana, you're related in some way to a banana. You're related in some way to this thing. So all you're really pointing to is, Jim Bob, do you agree there's a specific way you're related to your dad? Yeah, I agree. But the only reason that is useful as a method is because I can track back and affirm my dad, who my dad is. Once you keep expanding back in time, you lose that capability. So it's only useful for the here and now when you have access to the father or his father. And then you start losing it, right? You start losing this strict methodology for relatedness. So I don't.
So that's real quick. I mean, so 50% related to banana, 98.6 to chimpanzees. Like, what's your answer for that?
My answer is that we're all made of similar things, and that's a functional relationship. That all of our the way we function, we use similar things in our body, and our body operates similarly. Let's put it this way. Isn't, under the evolutionary view, isn't it true that two things can have this almost the similar, very close to similar anatomy, physical structure, and not be related? Right?
Cryptic species. Species.
Yeah. So similarity in structure doesn't actually entail or confirm relatedness. So just because you find similarity in structure at the molecular level, in this case, DNA looks like this DNA and it's shared in some way, it doesn't follow that you're related in the same way I'm related to my father. I'm related to a banana. What I'm trying to posit to you, Greg, is that in biology, because there's so much overlap in the structure and the composition of us all around, we could be related in multiple ways, but doesn't mean we're related in every way. I think that's fair.
This one from, appreciate your question, Big League Drew says, what are your thoughts on Rupert Sheldrake's morphic resonance theory?
I'm not aware of that, actually.
I have no idea.
I know the name. I know the guy, though, but I don't know what you're referring to.
Yeah, sorry, I have no idea.
You got it. They also asked, okay, for real, last super chat, pray for MXXXD, watch his after show, and you'll know why he needs prayer. Hope you're doing okay, Max. And they said, you do not use a flathead screwdriver on a Torx screw. Guy has never turned a wrench.
It would work if you get the right size flathead on there, you know? It would work. Oh, you've never tried that? Nobody's ever tried that to try to get it? I mean, come on.
Take a walk on the wild side. Orthba says, love the evolution debates. I always learn a lot. W is Jim Bob and chat. God bless. Marilyn says, did we come from star farts, Dr. Greg? In other words,
star farts. Star farts.
Yeah, we did from one that, yeah, I think so.
This one from?
I have a question, Greg. Is there anything inside the evolutionary view, just generally the grand view, that you're like, I don't know about that one?
The biggest the biggest thing that I do hold outside of like the scientific mainstream that is not technically correct, but I do think that it is personally, is that I do think that viruses are considered living. They should be considered living, but since microbiology does not consider them living, therefore they are not considered living, and in my personal opinion has no opinion on the thing. I have to do the work of convincing all of microbiology in order for that to be true. But I think that there should be enough evidence to think that. Yeah.
This one, do appreciate your question. Fisher the Breeze Builder says, Manor Reports versus 1313 Maryland is a good debate. Maybe. Big League Drew says, wait, you're telling me I was supposed to have lost my nub? They kept telling me it was totally normal. This one from Macedonia. Mitochondria says, I think it's a play on mitochondria. Okay. Explain the Big Bang, how nothing became something, and where did friction come from? The Big Bang only explains material. You don't have quantum physics in any theory. We are literally just a thought of our brain, so energy.
Yeah, I'm not a physicist. I can't really explain the Big Bang. So
this one from Duh Freak says, does Dr. Greg believe in genetic entropy?
I'm not, what was, I don't know what that term means.
Jim Bob, are you familiar? Because I actually don't either.
I think it's referring to, I don't know if it's ultimately the right use when you look into it of the word entropy, but I think maybe it's referring to like there is like the purest state of genetics, and then it kind of separates and it degrades basically. I think is that it's referring to that.
That's what I just read. Yeah,
there's a degradation of something that starts as a whole very structured and sort of kind of moves away.
I mean, there's like metagenomics, which is like the silencing of large parts of like chromosomes with methylations and stuff like that. So then it allows like the accumulation of if you don't need it, you're silencing parts of that genome, then you actually have the ability to kind of accrue genetic mutations that could be deleterious within it.
Yeah. I think deterioration kind of does make sense from my view, that like even if you granted everything evolution posits, it seems like the direction isn't actually upward, which is kind of in tension with evolution, which is like we started as primordial, and then we grew upward and built like sort of like the biological Tower of Babel, and now we're at the top of the world. And there's another view that holds, it could be the case that you start at the purest form, whether or not you're a creationist and you think that everything was created or not, that you start with like the more rigid application of life and then it sort of withers down away. It breaks down. It keeps like splintering away. And actually, your guys' tree, your arbitrary tree of life of clades, actually does show splintering away from a root, right? So I think, in a sense, would you say that's growth and progress, or is it actually moving away from something actually central and core, right?
No, the phylogenetic tree is just like a relationary thing, not like as a building up. Like again, like bacteria that is alive today is as advanced as humans.
As advanced. Well, there's no real,
Mhm.
I mean, let's face it, under the evolutionary view, advanced is a qualitative statement.
They're
That
as
doesn't actually,
evolved.
yeah,
They're
that
as
doesn't,
evolved. Yeah.
that doesn't actually exist. There's no less, you're saying there's no less or more evolved at all. There's nothing called advanced at all, right?
They're as evolved by definition. Yeah.
Right.
This one from Do Appreciate It. Bigly Drew says, wait, oh, I got that. There's one that I thought I missed. There we go. Thanks for your kind words, Orbtha, and all credit to the speakers who are linked in the description box. Check them out. Earthly Skeptic says, Jim Bob, DNA tests reveal how closely two humans are related. Same tests show humans and chimps are related. Why trust one test, namely if you use it for, let's say, paternity tests, but
Okay.
not the other?
Because they're two different categories of what you're testing. And like I said before, the only reason we appeal to the paternity test is because we have access to the father. That's the whole reason we do it. Like, that's why there's Maury Povich. Like, that's the whole reason you do it. If there was no father, there would be no reveal, right? And so what I'm saying is that if genetics is just this like this broad way of saying, look, genetics is a physical biological structure found in all living things, and we agree, finding something similar is not really saying much. That's like saying, look, that thing also flies and this thing flies. They must be related. Well, yeah, they're related in the structure, but that doesn't mean things can't be related in different ways. And in the end, you're actually saying structure, physical structure. DNA is physical structure. You're saying, look, this physical structure in this particular instance is evidence of the father. And the only reason we know that is we look at the father. But it doesn't actually follow that the same kind of relatedness is determined because we find the similar structures in bananas. Now, the question is, do we ever find the structure in a banana that's identical to our structure to the extent we would say of the banana is our father? No, right? No. So it's like you're making the distinction for me by asking.
Yeah, flight has evolved multiple times. You know, like bats and birds are not related to one another, and yet they both evolved flight. So
Yeah.
you have like different
Function.
DNA. You have different DNA that
Right.
accomplishes the same goal.
Yes, so this is really good, Greg. If DNA, when you look at it from a functional position, you could have similar DNA that provides similar function in unrelated things.
Yeah, I mean, we can take human genes out of our genome and put it into bacteria and make that exact same protein. So
That's
like
it.
for
Yeah.
like human insulin, for example.
Yeah, that's what my point is, that we're really just looking at function. Similarity in function doesn't follow that things are they're ancestral or come from each other. They're just similar in structure, and that's it. I mean, that you're not really saying much. It's not controversial.
Thanks for your super sticker, Stevenson Al. And Mitochondria says humans are more related to pigs, not monkeys. Neglectful Sausage says evolution is the radical notion that speciation occurs when a single finch is geographically separated to islands plus time. Dog breeds have different temperaments, but humans only differ by skin color.
Do you
Okay.
believe that?
I mean, there are like basically humans that have like, I mean, we definitely can. The best way to do this is actually mitochondrial like DNA like sequencing, and we can like trace, the mitochondrial Eve. It's because like the sperm is, that's where all the mitochondria is in the sperm, and when it sloughs off during the entry into the egg is basically where all the mitochondria is, and that's why us, like the offspring, actually have 99.999% of our mitochondrial genome from the mother.
I,
So you
I
can
have
trace that back. Yeah,
I have a question. You said we're apes, right?
correct.
Would you refer to yourself as an ape?
Yes, we are apes.
And I'm an ape?
Correct.
And George Floyd was an ape?
Correct.
Okay.
This one
I mean,
from
not in the racist sense that you're trying to bait
What
me
do you
into, but
what? No. It's not a
yes.
race. It's just
Mhm.
categorization.
one thing I
Sure.
don't understand, but their last question I don't understand why they say dog breeds have different temperaments, but humans only differ by skin color. What, like, wouldn't everybody, like Dr. Greg, you would say, like, well, yeah, humans, like, on an individual basis, mine and Jim
So
Bob's temperaments are different even.
Fuck
yeah, I
yeah.
mean, so like have the humans been like, every time we put ourselves into a UFC match and only the victors of that, a breed or something like that, and then those humans would be, more inclined for violence or something like that, then maybe, but that would be the analogy to like dog breeding or something like that. Dogs that are specifically bred, and they're so inbred in general as a population, that I think that, I mean, basically the problem with inbreeding is that you accumulate deleterious mutations within the population. So you need new immigration of new DNA in order to fix those errors in the instruction manual, and you don't get that through inbreeding.
Yeah, Islam.
This one from Forte says, greetings, fellow species members. Natural selection favors this random horizontal transfer. Rachel Wilson says, it happened because it had to happen, and it had to happen because it happened. LOL. Dr. Greg, I think she's suggesting that you have a circular approach. I think that's what she's trying to jab at you. What are your thoughts?
I mean, then what's happening with like the David R. Liu experiments and the directed evolution, the experiments that we do in the lab, where we observe and we use evolution as a mechanism in order to see what mutations are the best, and we observe from all those random mutations, we see some alleles populate higher because of fitness advantages. I mean, like, what is happening there?
Well, that seems to be, I remember when she commented, that was during the section where we were trying to bridge chronologically from asexual to two-part sexual. I would say the category difference here when you're talking about doing stuff in the lab is you're actually just looking at a group of organisms, introducing some environmental pressures, and determining whether or not they react or not. I would say that's what's true of the part, but what's true of the whole isn't necessarily, as you had conceded in the debate, what's true of the whole, that doesn't follow that kind of change is true of the whole, that it follows that you get that, right? That's actually a composition fallacy definitionally. So you can manipulate stuff in the lab and get reactions in the population, in the individual, but you're actually manipulating it. You're actually prodding it to do something. And the question, Dr. Greg, is, okay, how much information is already embedded in it to respond? Like, is there any way to tell whether it's already embedded and reacts to stimuli in a certain way that's advantageous, or whether
you'd have a negative control where you'd have nothing introduced, and then you would have specific DNA changes, and that's the only difference. I mean, that is the thing. It's the only difference between any of these type of millions and millions of different microbes would be this one sequence. So you are capable of discerning that, like, this specific polymorphism is actually giving a fitness advantage, and that's the experimental design and making sure that that's how it works.
That's the thing. And the end all question is, okay, if there's fitness advantages that if we granted not at the epigenetic but at the genome level, because that's what you're saying, right? It's not epigenetic, it's actually a change in the actual sequence. Okay.
Yeah.
If that was granted in the environment that you're watching it, the question is still, is that observation, is that enough to justify the assumption that entire categories of animals themselves transform over time to new entirely new animals?
Dude, the fact that we can see that so quickly in the lab makes a huge point that over billions of years, considering that bacteria, the replication time the doubling time is an hour. Now consider that over billions of years, of course, you're going to have like a incredible change that can happen.
Well, no,
Absolutely.
that's the assumption. Well, that you're back into the composition fallacy, because all you're saying is what's true of a part of biology at the micro level must necessarily be true of the whole. That they, like, for instance, if you can manipulate small changes in a human being in an experiment, does it follow that the category human being can change? And I say that's a composition fallacy.
This one from, thank you for your super sticker, Stevenson. Yerba Mate Talks says, after show on Yerba Mate Talks, open panel, let's discuss the debate. Chicken pork adobo says, which came first, the chicken or the egg? I think we know this is like been asked a million times, but if you guys want to answer
For centuries.
This one
Pretty
from
sure it was the
Kevin
egg.
Blackwell.
I'm not 100% sure. Wait, no, there's the, yeah, I thought it was the egg.
You know what Neil deGrasse Tyson says? Neil deGrasse Tyson? Not that you would appeal to him necessarily, but he said, well, no, the egg comes from something that's not a chicken. That's what he says. He says it's neither. The chicken egg, the universal thing called a chicken egg, actually was produced accidentally by way of some mutation from something that wasn't a chicken. Then that was the moment. That was the moment of the new chicken. Was a new egg, a unique golden chicken egg from a non-chicken, where the first chicken emerged onto the stage.
I mean, you have 400 million year old shark that can lay eggs, so I think chickens are a lot sooner than that.
This one from Kevin Blackwell says, for Greg, why haven't biologists answered the mathematical objections to evolution presented in the Wistar Symposium of 1966? It's been 60 years.
Help me prove that evolution is not real, and I'll give you a portion of my Nobel Prize and help me become the most famous scientist of all time.
Well, you can't. Well, you can't. You know why, Greg?
Yeah, of course I can.
Because evolution's unfalsifiable. So it's not scientific.
Okay. I mean, we literally use it in science, but I mean, yeah, absolutely. I mean, if I could, I would prove that evolution is not real. I mean, that would be amazing for me.
Rachel Wilson strikes again, says, Dr. Greg is a science denier if he thinks that physics of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu can beat the physics of firearms. This one from Richie.
Statistically, for your own sake, Dr. Greg, you eventually do lose that, because the ability to have a concealed carry and respond quickly to another gun, there's no like, in the end, if they're good with that, if they're good at shooting, man, there's no rear naked choke or arm bar that's gonna stop that bullet from hitting you, man.
We'll see.
This one from Richie Torres MMA says, as a BJJ black belt myself, why would we need jiu-jitsu to evolve? What's the advantage for an art?
Oh, we do see that, right? You saw that with the Danaher Death Squad and leg locks. I mean, that's the whole idea with attacking the second part of the body that we weren't attacking before. So I think you do see a huge evolution in jiu-jitsu, like the Japanese style to Brazilian to the American and the leg lock systems that we see today. So we do see it.
You got it. In Their Shoes Apologetic says, Dr. Greg, if you fit consciousness into evolutionary theory, that'd be Darwinism. You move away from science into a metaphysical or philosophical worldview.
Darwin doesn't really have anything to say about like the molecular mechanisms and stuff that I kind of understand evolution through now. So it doesn't really, I don't really care who he is, what he believed. We don't cite the origin of species in biology nowadays.
This one from Simply Put says, I witnessed Dr. Greg evolve into Aesop every time he asked for the mechanism. What's Aesop? Like Aesop's fables? I don't understand.
Aesop.
Okay.
I'm a boomer. I don't know.
I'm a boomer too. Gadfly.
ASAP? Wait, as soon as possible? As soon as possible?
No. Aesop, like AESOP, like from Aesop's fables.
I don't know what that means.
Me neither.
I don't know. Sorry.
That's weird. Gadfly says, I may not agree with Dr. Greg, but I appreciate him being nice and not a smug jerk. like some evolutionists. Cheers, Greg.
Well,
Got
thank
a
you.
fan out there. It has been a very
Oh, yeah,
congenial debate.
it is a set of famous series of experiments used by biologists to test the intelligence and causal reasoning of animals, crows and ravens specifically.
Oh, okay, cool.
This one from Neglectful Sausage says, ask him if the existence of ethnic groups in indigenous territory matters, and if it's bad from an evolutionary perspective if another group displaces.
Mm-hmm. That's what I asked, kind of. It's like, why not? It's like an advantage to protect your own. If there is a thing called a species or an in-group, it makes sense to work together to defend it from aggressors. So it's like, seems like honestly, you got Bernie in the back.
That's where you're wrong, dude. There's actually hybrid vigor for immigration and actually creating more genetic diversity. So yeah, hybrid vigor, it's a thing in biology.
What's the biological evolutionary advantage of abortion?
People having a way of creating their own life that they've chosen as opposed to being baby factories.
No, hold on a second. Isn't evolution fitness based on reproduction and passing down your genes?
Yes, but we exist and we should want to exist outside of.
You can't exist if you don't have babies, bro. You support Bernie Sanders.
We have plenty of babies.
No,
I have four kids. I have four kids. We're totally fine.
We're under replacement, Dr. Greg.
No, we're not.
Oh, we're not? Okay.
No,
all right.
we're not.
All right,
dude.
Okay, dude.
This one from Adam Owen says, Dr. Greg, how can you evolve to survive while randomly mutating?
How can you evolve to survive while randomly mutating? I mean, basically, whether or not those mutations that you mutate are going to be seen, whether or not they're beneficial or not. So that is what natural selection is.
This one from Mitochondria says, eat FUK Metallica never dies. To my brother in arms, we stand alone, we die alone, and we fight for you forevermore.
Beautiful.
Was I supposed to get that? Am I too much of a
poetry
to get the reference? This one from Basil Problem. Jim Bob, your old pal, says, Jim Bob, you are truly arrogantly misinformed. God bless.
That's not an argument. You didn't cite. It would help the audience, both mine and his, to say how I'm misinformed, reference something. If Greg said I was misinformed, I'd say, thank you, Greg. Tell me how. If I said, Greg, you're misinformed, he would say, please tell me how. I mean, come on, man.
This one from Earthly Skeptic says, both. Would you please describe how DNA sequence alignment is done?
What? For both? What? Say that again, sorry.
Can you each describe how DNA sequence alignment is done? Or how
sequence? Are you saying that's a thing that occurs? How does that natural thing occur? Sequence alignment?
DNA sequence alignment. Like, how does it occur in your view?
I don't know. I mean, he would know.
Yeah, you create like an amplicon based off of the region of your genome that you want to sequence, and then you use PCR in order to give adapters at the end, and then using Illumina-based sequencing by synthesis, you would have a chip that would bind to one of those adapters, and they would actually bind to a second one. And then as these things are denatured, you basically have the ability for fluorophores to be emitted as the nucleotides are added on each of the strands of the DNA. And then once those basically are added, then you unbind them from those adapters, and then you have the sequence based off of the camera looking down at those fluorophores on those chips. And now you have like all these different reads that you would align, and you would basically take those adapters that you knew because you PCR'd them, so you know what the primer sequence is, and then you use stuff like Python or Perl, and then you basically purge all the bad reads, and then you align them in creating contigs in order to build out, the read coverage of that specific part of the genome. So this is like amplicon-based sequencing. I don't want to go. I mean, I could go into whole genome sequencing if you wanted to, but that's how it's done. And yeah, basically, modern next generation sequencing is more like data science than it is like than like Punnett squares, for example. We're talking like it's honestly incredible what we can do.
Can you repeat that?
Yeah, well,
I'm just kidding.
The big point, though, like genuinely, the big thing to understand about next generation sequencing and why it's so different is that we are able now, in order to sequence populations of microbes at one time now, before we had to isolate just one organism through Sanger sequencing, and then now we're actually able to do entire populations. So it's like it absolutely revolutionized microbiology as a field, and that's why we know that there's root microbiomes now under trees. That's why we know about the gut microbiomes inside.
Dr. Greg. Dr. Greg, I have a question. You work but within the sort of CRISPR engineering, right?
Yeah, I've worked with CRISPR since 2014.
I have an ethical question for you.
Okay.
If you develop something from the gene perspective that gives someone an immediate advantage biologically, and it just happens to cost more money, right? How do you go about managing who gets to have that advantage or not?
Exactly right. How the access to these new pharmacological methods are going to be really important, and I think that that's a really good ethical consideration that we have to have. Like, for example, David Arlou is now curing childhood leukemia with one administration of this medicine that he created. I mean, within 6 months, the kid was in remission. That had a bone marrow transplant failed, that chemotherapy failed, and now we are doing it. This gene therapy on already created adults that have already gone through the formation process. But actually last year the runner-up for breakthrough of the year from Science Mag was actually David Arlou, same guy, creating the first bespoke medicine that actually fixed these heritable diseases before a baby was born. So we're actually fixing maladies before it actually happens. So
that sounds like really benevolent, but I'm actually arguing like, well, Marvel style. You get an injection, and suddenly Bernie Sanders has biceps kind of stuff. Like how do you manage the ethics, not of what to help? Obviously, we all kind of go, yeah, help. If it's useful for helping people in a really meaningful way, obviously, that goes without saying. That's assuming future knowledge of the symptoms later on that we don't know about. But like, I'm talking about like superhero shit where it's like, okay, you got really good eyesight now, you could afford it. Like, do you just take the position that like, well, it has to cost money and it's a luxury, so the richest people, the rulers of the world, get the first dibs on bionic updates?
No, that's kind of a huge problem. This Darwinian model that you're proposing would be a huge problem, because you'd basically have poorer countries having increased healthcare costs because they would have more disease amongst their populations. So it's actually like really important that these like tools are more or very accessible. So you're right in that it's a huge problem. How and what new diseases or like treatments that we use through gene therapy is basically done through the FDA. So the FDA right now does basically green lights or not what the next treatment is, and there actually is no specific ban on human gene editing in the United States, and there's actually dozens of human trials that are happening right now all across the globe. So it's definitely happening, and it's awesome technology. It's amazing. But right now the cost is prohibitive. It's like we're talking millions of dollars per treatment. So hopefully, and the same guy, David Arlou, thought about something on how to make one treatment actually cure dozens or maybe even 100 different diseases by it's a change in tRNAs and stuff like that. It'd be a molecular mechanism that it's too hard to explain here. But basically, the next it could be, in my opinion, maybe even bigger. Like the next biggest jump since like antibiotics. It's going to be absolutely incredible. So we'll see if it pans out.
We have two more quick questions. Simply put, 1776 says, oh, okay, so the Aesop, they're meaning like when Dr. Greg is asked a question, he becomes Aesop because Aesop wrote the fables. And so they were like, Dr. Greg is like telling a story. But Dr. Greg, I have a feeling you'd say that you're not just making up a story. If you want to respond, you can.
I am a scientist. So when I'm asked a question, I genuinely do try to think about like the science, like how to apply the scientific method, what would be the hypothesis, what would be the method, what would be the expected results. You know, so I do try to think about like things like that. So that's the yeah.
This one last one that I see here. Earthly Skeptic says, Jim Bob, learn about DNA first, then argue evolution.
That's not necessary, because evolution is built on assumptions, and I grant my opponent's knowledge of DNA, and his knowledge of DNA is independent of the assumptions of evolution, which are, let's be honest, it starts with a philosophy of the world and how it works. So, you know, if you can't understand the distinction between understanding specificity of DNA versus understanding the assumptions of evolution, which are distinct, that's on you, man. I don't know. Wear a helmet.
Two more, actually. I missed one. This is Earthly Skeptic says, Jim Bob, did Latin, quote unquote, purposely transform into Spanish?
No, the common analogy for language falls apart, because the thing about language is it only makes sense if the referent doesn't change. So the word for apple and in Latin or in Spanish or in French might change. The referent doesn't. In biology, we're actually talking about the assumption that apples change or sharks change. The referent. So you got to learn the difference between a reference and a referent. The language analogy falls apart, so does the light spectrum. Don't bring that shit to me. I'll knock it right down.
Mr. Kreenan says, question, if we switched on the genes that make humans linguistic intelligence while leaving it switched off, normal chimp, but switched on, is that chimp still a chimp? Did that make sense to either of you?
Wait, if you switch the gene, like, I guess a better way of reframing it, I'm going to try to reframe it for you. Is there a threshold where you could change something in the DNA where something you could actually declare it's no longer itself? It's kind of like the question I was asking you, Dr. Greg, with the bacteria. Let's move it into the human form. Is there something you can change right now, if you were capable of changing with a human being, where the effects of that change, you would declare them as a completely new species, like a not a human, or even a new species? Like, could you do that?
I don't know. I mean, that's a really interesting question. I mean, there are like I'm thinking about, like, would we, if we introduced the amphibian ability in order to regrow a limb or something like that, would we consider those like still humans or something? Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. That'd be hard to say. It would be to see whether or not we can, like, if we still can mate with that person or that population. If there's like a lot of different questions that would be arising for it. But the ethical consideration for this stuff is like, what do you do with the people that this stuff isn't successful for? There's a huge ethical problem that exists, and this is why like the scientific community universally shunned that person in 2018 that did earlier than that, 2016, 2017, that did the human gene editing with HIV resistance in China. So they did like a twin study where they actually knocked out a portion of the human genome in order to try to make humans HIV resistant. So it was like very unethical. There was like it wasn't an evolved specific tool, that kind of thing. So, but I do. Go ahead,
Dr. Greg. Sorry. Speaking of HIV, what's the evolutionary advantage of homosexuality?
Because then you have, on the other side, you have hypersexuality. So basically, the ability for like the spectrum of human experience that we see within a frontal lobe can span between people that are asexual, that are homosexual, that are pansexual. The entire gamut.
You mean so you're saying, based on that notion, that pedosexual would be an advantage too, then, because it's diverse?
No.
What do you mean? That follows. That follows.
No, definitely
it does.
Not.
It does follow, though.
No, it doesn't.
It does. Play it back. It follows.
It doesn't. No.
It does. You said diversity is the strength. So like if the more you add to the variety of sexual proclivities would necessarily entail some sort of like some advantage, right? So I mean,
no,
you're gonna have to bite the bullet on that one.
No, I think religion's the one that tried that, and it's been failed, dude. So definitely not.
No. Evolution.
No, definitely
Actually,
religious.
Wait.
Definitely
No,
religious people
hold on, Greg.
are making the argument that
Greg,
people should have sex with
hold on.
younger people.
Greg,
not me.
hold on a second. Actually, that's not actually statistically true, but forget that for a second.
Okay.
Actually, statistically true is that public education has more child abuse, sexual and emotional, than churches.
Then
but
what?
No,
Vatican?
then yeah, all churches actually. So,
okay.
but the problem is with your view is that, isn't it true that if you held an evolutionary view, that a theistic view, the very philosophy of theism, would be a product of evolution too?
It is, yeah. Yeah, exactly. So religion is created by evolution because we've shown through basically computer models that a population that looks after one another, that shares resources, that is defensive for one another, and that's why the humans have created thousands of different religions inside.
But
history.
theism, you try to do a burn on theism, right? But the thing is, you'd have to admit, if Christians especially, but theists in general, if they actually reproduce more than secularist atheists, we're in some sense more evolutionarily fit, right?
Hey, I mean, I have 4 kids, so I'm trying to outbreed y'all because someone needs to make atheist scientists out here.
I know, but you support Bernie Sanders, who's basically like, listen, you could abort your kid at any time, any place, just kill it. And it's like, dude, you're advocating for a guy who actually advocates for people to kill off their offspring. That's not evolutionarily advantageous, bro.
Definitely not. No.
We'll jump to this. I think we might have one last one. In the meantime, folks, our guests are linked in the description. You can learn more about their views. Oh, I think that's it. Double check. And also, DebateCon 7, folks, for the next 48 hours, and only the next 48 hours, that promo code that you see at the bottom right of your screen, 20 from stream, for 20% off your tickets to Modern Day Debates Conference, DebateCon 7 in Houston on January 31st. Use that promo code, get 20% off your tickets right now. It's linked in the description box. With that, I want to say thank you to our guests. It's been a tremendous debate. I'm going to wish our guests well, but folks, stay put. I will be back in just a moment, but thanks, Jim Bob and Dr. Greg. It was a great debate.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Amazing. Thank you guys for being here. That was a big, beautiful debate, a tremendous debate. I want to say thank you guys for all of your support. The debaters make this channel awesome. So we do appreciate the debaters. It really would be a sad channel if it was just me debating myself every night. You just wouldn't be able to take it. However, when we have guests like Dr. Greg and Jim Bob on, it is a beautiful show that, like I said, yeah, people just really enjoy that. A lot of positive reception. And if you haven't yet, hit that like button. We are so close, like so close to 350 likes. We're at 320 right now. So we just need 30 more. There's 482 live viewers. I'm sure we can get there. We're so close. I can taste it. But I got to tell you, you guys, if you did not know, Modern Day Debate has our own conference. You guessed it, DebateCon. And it's coming up Saturday, January 31st. 9 days away. It's going to be here before you know it. You're going to be like, whoa, I feel like I just woke up and all of a sudden it's January 31st. So get your tickets right now. We're expecting it to sell out. In other words, no seats left. It's going to be packed. Don't miss out on this. Now, especially because you can use the code. It's pinned at the top of the live chat. You can use the code 20 from stream for 20% off your ticket. But it's only good for 48 hours. So you have to buy your ticket by Saturday night at midnight. Don't miss out. Dr. David Wood, Apostate Prophet, Inspiring Philosophy, Mike Jones, Atheist, Danny Philtalk, Daniel Hakikachu, Jake Brancatella, Hassan Shibli, who's a Muslim lawyer, if you don't know who that is. They are going to have a big, beautiful conference. As I got to tell you, my friends, the topics are controversial. It's primarily Christianity versus Islam, but it's also some atheism versus Islam. And I've got to tell you, we're excited about this one. If you can't watch it in person, because I know that you're like, hey, I'd love to go in person, but I'm really far away. Or I work, I just can't get out of work. I just can't do that. You can watch it from the comfort of your very own home, as you see on screen right now. For $14.99, the Final Word membership tier unlocks the entire conference live, so you can watch it from home. Now you might be thinking, like, oh, James, like you're just never going to release the debates. Well, we will release the debates to the public. They will, but for the live stream, join the Final Word membership tier. If you are unfamiliar with channel memberships, click that join button. It's near where you would find the subscribe button, and that shows you the different membership tiers. I got to tell you, we are out of our goal for 3 members during this stream. We are at 2 out of 3. So we are gunning for 3 out of 3. In other words, one more membership is, if you get your Final Word membership now, it will take you through the debate. So in other words, like, because it lasts 30 days. So if you get it now, you will get to see that big, beautiful conference. Check that out now. I'm going to say hello to our friends in chat. Joe Smith says, why did you invite the Islamist who said he would let his brother marry his niece to the next conference? How can you take him seriously? You know what? We will host even the most controversial people. Daniel, I think you're probably talking about Daniel, and you're talking about a popular short. We recently had a short pop off that was, I think it's already gotten, I think it's gotten like 250,000 views in the last few days. And it had that subject matter. Is you won't regret seeing this debate between Daniel and atheist Danny Philtalk. It's on what view brainwashes more, Islam or atheism. But I've got to tell you, let me say hello. Exotic Spida, thanks for being a member in the old live chat. I see you there, as well as thank you for being a member. Grumble Snort, we appreciate that very much. And Amadeus, thank you. I see you there in the old live chat. And then Daniel J8876 says, you can debate too, James. I might debate someday. I might. Is if you become a member, for real, if you're at the debater level of our channel memberships, that's a cool thing too, is if you do the Final Word, that's like the highest level membership, so you get this perk as well. But if you're at the debater level and higher, such as the Final Word, you can actually see my past debates, because there are some that are remote, in other words, like on Zoom, like this debate. And then there's also an in-person debate that I did in 2014. So yeah, I have debated before. I love debates. They're so fun, and I love moderating. But I will admit, debating is more fun. There's a reason why there are a ton of channels like Jim Bob or others. Like some of them now are doing debate an atheist, and they do like their live stream on TikTok or something. I don't understand, but it's on YouTube too. And there's a reason there are many of those, and there are very few modern day debate type channels that are like, hey, we're a platform, not a debater per se. Debating is more fun, and I hope to do it someday again. But the timing has to be just right. But Mr. Creenan, thank you for coming by. Thank you for your hitting that like button. And Kalos Shane, thanks for coming by. And then, let me see here. Good old Anton Sugar is here. As well as, let me just see something really quick. I have to see, because you guys might not hear this. Okay. Anton, good to see you again.
Wow.
Joseph Mullen says, "Are you holding out on a good Trump impersonation?" You know, I don't really have a good one. I'm trying to think if I have an impersonation of anybody. It would be so fun. I should work on impersonations of the debaters, because that would be really fun. I'm trying to think of who it was that. Oh yeah, Kent Hovind. Everybody used to do impressions of Kent Hovind. All right, that's not my wife. That's just a picture of her. Okay. And let's see. Exactly. Thank you for your kind words. Says Modern Day Debate is the best debate platform. We appreciate that. We are excited about the future. We believe that YouTube deserves a better class of debate channel, and we're going to give it to them.
Yeah.
Now, I've got to tell you, we are so appreciative. Bail bonds is do Craig. I can't do Craig. It'd be tough. I know that he has kind of a unique like cadence to where, it's possible, but it's tough to think of. Then the funny thing is for us as Americans, it's even easier because he has an accent, but I'm not. I'm very bad at trying to do European accents.
Yeah.
And Mr. Creenan says, "Bravo, this isn't a safe space where it's where we go to confront." It is. And, we have some controversial stuff on here.
Yeah.
We do. It's true. But I've got to tell you, we just believe that it's best to let 1,000 flowers bloom. We think that the best debates are ones where the best arguments are presented and the best ideas win.
Yeah.
So Joseph Mullen says, haha, that'd be awesome. And they would love it, I bet. Thank you. I appreciate that, brother. And we are excited about the future. Modern Day Debate, we are small, for real. Right now, we are still small, even at 246,000 subscribers. We appreciate that. We're excited, and we appreciate you guys subscribing. Do hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. But nonetheless, where we are right now is small compared to where we will be in the future. Join us where we are small while we are young, because in the future, when we're at 1 million or even 500,000, we'll look back and we'll be like, wow, that was small. Where we are right now, 246,000, it's still small.
Yeah, well, that's what it is.
That's what it is. So I've got to tell you, we have big things in store for the future. So we're at 322 likes. We can totally get to 350.
Yes.
We're so close. We're at 329. We just jumped up by 7. So thank you for those likes. We can totally get to the big, beautiful 350. We're only, what would that be?
Yes.
300. We have to be like 21. I'm sorry. It's hard to focus. But yes, I've got to tell you, Mill 99999. Good to see you in the live chat. Anton Sugar, Exotic Spida. Exactly. Daniel J. Let's see here. Callaway does chain 1163. Thank you for coming by. Amos Huckleberry, longtime viewer. Good to see you.
Yes.
As well as I have this new toy that I'm playing with. Dr. Greg Show. See you. Good to see you. He says, hey all, this is my new YouTube channel. Sorry, the peer review is my old channel. Oh, okay. No problem. Let me go to your channel and I can get that link. Go to channel. Okay, cool. So I'm going to put that in live chat or in the description box right now, and then we'll get that corrected.
Yes.
And so I'm going to put that in. I'm going to put your my guess is you want your link tree there first, or channel at, and then I'll put your channel. And man, let's see. You got to have do you have your handle? Oh, there you go. You got a handle, Dr. Greg Show. We'll put that. That's shorter than the link. Let's see, Dr. Greg Show. And you, let's see. Where's the hyperlink? Come on. Dr. Greg Show. Amazing. There it is.
Yes.
All right. Thanks for letting me know about that. I'm like behind on the times. But yes, we are excited about the future. We are going to have a lot of debates in the next week.
Yes.
In particular, we are going to have a debate tomorrow. Christianity versus Islam, which condones slavery. So it's going to be controversial.
Yes.
And then the night after, we are going to have a debate on. Actually, let me just pull up on the calendar. So yeah, we have got a lot coming up here. What is it? So that's tomorrow. Then Saturday, we're going to have Feminism on Trial. Taylor Fogarty is going to be taking on Amanda Norman.
Yes.
It's going to be a good debate. As well as Sunday, if the weather doesn't knock out everybody's power, we will host Andrew Wilson against Adam Kahn on whether or not Trump is a fascist.
Yes.
Then, by the way, if anybody wants to debate that topic, that's the topic that Andrew is up for debating, whether or not Trump is fascist. Then on Monday, we just confirmed this. Should America continue to support Israel? JF Gariepi returns after many years. I think it's been like 2 years since we've hosted JF. And he will be taking on Counterpoints.
Yes.
Then, yeah, there's more. This is crazy. We might have one on next Tuesday. That one might be a religion one, but I'm still kind of waiting on the speakers. I don't know if that one's going to happen, to be honest. We might have one on the topic of abortion. I try not to say that word too much. That used to get us demonetized, that topic. But now we can host it and we never get demonetized. I don't know. Don't ask me.
Yes.
But that would be Taylor Fogarty against First Amender, but I'm waiting on First Amender to see if he is available. So then at the conference, so this would be 9 days from now, 4 different debates. It's going to be amazing.
Yes.
Thank you guys for your support. We are excited about the future. I honestly, during these post-debate streams, it's hard for me to leave because I just enjoy it. Thank you guys for being supporters and friends. Honestly, you guys are like the regulars. You guys, and I appreciate you being here because Modern Day Debate's like a weird type of channel. And this happens to most debate channels, is that people usually show up because one of two things. One, their favorite debater is on, right? So let's say they're a fan of Jim Bob or a fan of Dr. Greg.
Yes.
The other thing is there are also, though, like, you might say regulars. They love debates, but they do want one thing, which is that they want the debaters to be good. And tonight we had good debaters, which is awesome. But like, when we have novice guys, like sometimes we'll have new guys because we want to get guys new experience and, try new guys. As that sometimes it'll be like, whoa, only like 200 people watching. And that's okay. You guys are the regulars, though. That 200 is in here right now because a lot of you guys just love hanging out here, and I appreciate that so much. It means more than you know. And
Yes.
Daniel J, 8876, thank you for your support. Exotic Spider. Amanda, DC4L, thanks for your kind words. I see you there. And Anton Shigur. But yeah, we do have a lot of those regulars, and we appreciate you guys watching because you guys usually show up no matter what. You're just like, I just love debates. And sometimes you guys don't even mind like when it's, what's the word? Green debaters, guys who don't have as much experience that you just love being here. And I love being here too. So I just love when you guys are here because you guys make this fun. So I always love hanging out in these like post-debate chats and getting to say, where are you guys saying hello from? I am in Las Vegas right now. I'm moving to, this is just a temporary stint. I'm moving to test it out to California. I'm going to California. And I'm very excited about this. California is like, you can't dispute. It is beautiful. I mean, the national parks are unreal. Like Yosemite is just one example of like, it's insane. I'm going to live there for 4 months starting February 1st. And my plan is to see all the national parks while I'm there. So I do plan on visiting those national parks. Sometimes it might be weekends. So for example, I might have a guest moderator jump in for me sometimes. Big Mike has been helping out. He's actually going to be hosting tomorrow. So that's going to be exciting.
Yes.
But yes, thank you, Marilyn. Appreciate your support. Always a regular, as well as Joseph Mullins. Thank you for your kind words. Exactly. Grumble Snort is from PA. Wow. And Anton Shigur is from Beef Tips. I haven't heard of that city. And Mr. Crean says, been watching your debate platform for a decade or more. I'm a fan of what you do. Thank you for your support. That means more than you know, Mr. Creenan.
Yes.
I appreciate that, and you have been with us a long time because I know I've seen your name for years and years. And Grumble Snort says, I can't imagine hosting or moderating a debate because I always want to jump in with my 2 cents. I get that. I feel tempted to jump in sometimes, especially if I feel like I have something like interesting to add, because sometimes I just think I'm like, ooh, this might be interesting. But I do it as little as possible just because I want the debaters to be as much of the focus as possible. So I do say as little as I can during the actual debates.
Yes.
Because it's just a way of, we want to spot like the speakers, right? There's nothing worse than a moderator that talks too much. And I think most moderators are good about that. I want to be fair. Like, it's rare, but once in a while you'll see one where you're like, do you invite your guests for you to talk or for them to talk? It's for the guests. But yes, thank you guys for your support. Joseph Mullins says, I'm saying hello from Mill 9999's mom house. Wow. Amanda, that's right. You're in Dallas.
Yes.
I hope that it's not too crazy. I know that you guys are expecting to get just a crazy storm. Anton Sugar, you're in East Texas. Are you serious?
Yes.
Wow. Now, Anton, if that's true, because I think it was West Texas that the movie, what was it called? A Few Good Men? No Country for Old Men. I think that was in West Texas, right? So are you being serious? Are you in East Texas? Now, Anton, let me know your city. I lived in Nacogdoches, and I'm not joking. I got my master's in psychology in East Texas. And then I lived in Houston for about, what was it? I don't know, 9 months, 8 months. And it was great. I loved it. So yeah, and I lived in Lubbock for 2 years too. That's where I got my master's in philosophy.
Yes.
Let's see. Mill 9999. You guys are so funny talking smack in chat. But yeah, Anton Sugar is in Fort Worth. Really? Whoa. Okay, look out. I hope you don't get too much snow there, pal. Look out. And let's see. Mr. Green says green debaters rule. And yes, no country for old me. That's funny. Yes.
Yes.
And let's see. Anton Sugar says, yep, Fort Worth. Wow, that's what it is.
Yes.
That is so wild.
Yeah, well, that's what it is.
Huh.
Yes.
Stephen F. Austin, modern day debate. Yes, I did go to Stephen F. Austin. Let's see. SFA, good basketball team. I never went to any sporting events while I was there. I was like, that was when I was like dialed in. I was just nonstop studying because that was like my last. I remember I was thinking, this is like my last. If I was going to use that master's to apply for a PhD program. And I thought, if I don't get into any PhDs this time, because I applied twice. The first round, I didn't get into any PhDs the first time. And so then I got the master's in psychology. And then I was like, okay, then I'll apply for the doctoral program. So it'll make me more well-rounded. And I thought, I'm going to be done with it if I don't get in this time. And I got in. I got in at Colorado State, and I got in at, I think it was UNC, North Carolina, was it Charlotte? And I think was there one more? I can't remember. But I thought, you know what? Awesome. And then I moved to Colorado, and went to Colorado State, which is an awesome experience. I did love that. It was a hard experience. But yeah, both of those cities, Fort Collins, Colorado, and Nacogdoches, I was no sporting events, even in Colorado, now that I think about it. But that's when I started, in addition to the doctorate, starting building modern day debate was in Colorado. And I hosted my friends Mike and Logan for the first debate ever. And before that, I was just doing different types of content, trying to figure out what I want to do. And I told them during their debate, which was live, it was a live stream, and it was streamed from my house. I wonder if I still have it. I should see if it's still on. Oh no, I deleted it because it was on immigration. I thought it was gonna. This is back. YouTube used to be really strict, right? So I deleted it because I thought like, oh, this is like controversial. YouTube might delete this, even though it was like, no, it totally wasn't. It was. They never would have deleted that, but I didn't know back then. And so that was my first debate, though, that I hosted, and it got. I told them, I said, "You guys, I can't believe it. We doubled the viewership of the last stream," and they were like, "Really?" And I was like, "Yeah." And I was like, "We had 4 live viewers," and they were like, "Whoa!" So, but yes, let's see.
Yes.
Daniel J 8876 says, James, have you been to Europe? I have, yes.
Yes.
And I loved Athens and Rome and Paris the most. And Amanda says, we are looking at mostly an ice storm in the DFW area. I'll text you photos if it gets crazy. You should. I do get a kick out of like natural disasters. I'm sorry. I hope it's not a natural disaster. I hope everything's safe. But it sounds like it might be. I don't know, though. I got to be honest. I'm just going to tell you. And I might be wrong about this. So this debate on Sunday with Andrew Wilson and Adam Kahn. I'm getting tired.
Yes.
We're going to host it, Lord willing, but it might not, because if the weather is that bad, then yeah, I know. Daniel J 8876. Rome is amazing because the ruins and the Colosseum are like, you could just sit and look at those. I could just sit and look at those for hours, and I did. I just would love. I went to Rome twice. Actually, that's like one of the few international spots I've gone back to because it was just so freaking awesome. So yeah, Rome is just amazing. I'm trying to remember, where did I stay the second time I went? But I know, because I saw the ruins. The first time I went, I saw the ruins at night. I didn't really see as much during the day. Catherine MS says, Lies, you love Switzerland the most. Oh yeah, Switzerland is really high up there. Thank you for your super chat, Catherine. I appreciate that. What's the word I'm looking for? I did love it. Switzerland was like it's like maybe the most beautiful in terms of natural beauty. I think it rivals, it's got to be the most beautiful that I've seen outside of the U.S. But we did a whole road trip, Catherine and I, and basically it was amazing. And the idea is, compared to, what's the word I'm looking for? Compared to the U.S., I mean, the U.S. has some bangers, though. And I haven't seen a lot of magical, not a lot of magical, what's the word? I haven't seen a lot of national parks internationally. I don't think I've seen any, actually. I was going to see one. Where was it? And then someone was like, we just didn't get to see it. I can't remember what country it was. Was it Scotland? I think it was Scotland. I wanted to go see it, and we just didn't have time. Someone else wanted to go to Aberdeen. We didn't get to see that either. But Joseph Mullen says, did you know the Colosseum was built by magical JEW Gold? No, I didn't. That's pretty interesting. Come on, really? Let me Google this. I'm sure that's how ChatGPT would word it. Magical JEW Gold. Was the Roman Colosseum built by... I know ChatGPT is about to tell me that's... Oh, this is interesting. It says shortly, because I asked, was the Roman Colosseum built by Jewish gold? They said, short answer, partly yes. They say after the Romans crushed the Jewish revolt and destroyed Jerusalem and the Second Temple, they seized enormous amounts of wealth. Ancient sources, including inscriptions and historians like Josephus, indicate that spoils from Judea helped finance major Roman projects, including the Colosseum. Whoa, I didn't know that. The Colosseum was begun around 72 CE under Emperor Vespasian. So that was just 5 years after the Romans crushed Jerusalem and apparently destroyed the Jerusalem and the Second Temple and seized a ton of wealth. So 5 years after that, they were like, hey, you know, we got a lot of money from crushing the JEWS in Jerusalem. So now you want to build a Colosseum with all this money we have sitting around? And they're like, yeah, let's do it. So, but yeah, that's so interesting. I got to admit, Joseph Mullins, that is super interesting. I was thinking like, oh no, here we go. Mr. Creenan says, Mile High City, you have such a body of content that you could and maybe should do a second channel from choice selections or reruns chopped up and combined for re-air or best of MDD. That could be cool. We thought about doing a clips channel. I don't know. I did it for like a month and then I just thought, I don't know if I want to. It's that I kind of just want to put the clips on here, right? And the reason is, it's just like, I kind of just like having this big hub where, you know, we're creeping up on 250,000 subs, which is a good start, but, you know, we have a ways to go. But that's kind of why I was like, well, you know, if we start a new channel, then those new subscribers from that new content go to that channel. Not many of them are going to come subscribe over here because of that. Some will, but I still just like, not as many as if we have it right here. So I don't know. Maybe someday, if there was someone who's like really good at like seeing those spots, then maybe we'd do it. But Gravios24, thanks for your super chat. Says, y'all got to admit that the trap blah, blah is like, I don't want to take sides when Dr. Greg and Jim Bob are not here. So I can't say that. I saw your super and I see that in live chat, but we are excited for the future. I'm tired though. I'm actually starting to feel pretty run down. Thank you guys for your support. It's always fun.
Yes.
Keep sifting out the reasonable from the unreasonable. We will see you guys. And then Grumble Snort, thanks for your kind words. That means a lot. Thank you guys. Keep sifting out the reasonable from the unreasonable. We will see you at the next debate, which is tomorrow night. So take care and see you soon.